Did you know that Kratos technically dies at the very start of God of War Ragnarok? Kratos has been deemed effectively immortal, cursed by the gods and Athena to walk the earth forever. As a son of Zeus, he already possessed godlike durability, but it was Athena's intervention after his first suicide attempt that sealed his fate to walk the realms forever. She revealed that the gods would not allow him to die by his own hand, effectively cursing him to live forever. He cannot die from old age, and he cannot take his own life. But that doesn't mean he hasn't been killed by others. Kratos has actually died multiple times in the series, only to claw his way back from Hades every single time. The first time Kratos actually dies in the series was when, in the first game, Ares impaled him with a massive stone pillar, sending him straight to the underworld. But Kratos climbed his way back out to claim Pandora's box. In God of War 2, Zeus tricked him into draining his godly powers and stabbed him through the chest with a blade of Olympus. Kratos was dragged to Hades again, only to be saved by Gaia. And at the end of God of War 3, when Kratos finally defeats and kills Zeus, Kratos stabs himself with the blades of Olympus and dies to save the rest of the world. We will discuss this later in the video, how he actually survived this and came back later in God of War 2018 out of the blue. But in God of War Ragnarok, his death was a lot different and subtle. I remember how this scene was leaked a few days before the actual release and how the internet broke that Kratos had actually died. One of the major speculations long before the release was that Kratos is going to die in the game, and he would slaughter everyone in Valhalla and come back as he did before. But what we actually got wasn't that straightforward. During the opening boss battle, if you fail a specific scripted QuickTime event, Thor strikes Kratos with Mjolnir so hard that it ends his life. The screen actually fades to a mock death screen, a classic game over that tricks the player into thinking they failed. But then, Thor refuses to let the fun end. Unwilling to fight a holding back Kratos, Thor slams Mjolnir into Kratos' chest, using the lightning as a defibrillator to shock him back to life. Narrative director Matt Sophos confirms that this was a legitimate death. Kratos died at that moment. This was a brilliant narrative trick. The prophecy in the previous game predicted Kratos would die at the end of the journey. By having Thor kill him in the first hour, the developers technically fulfilled the prophecy early, clearing the board for Kratos to change his fate and forge his own path by the game's end. God of War 2018's end reveals Atreus with a rather familiar name, Loki. Since then, players have been wondering how Kratos, a Greek demigod, could possibly be the father of the Norse trickster god. The game answers this with a brilliant linguistic bridge found on the very same murals that revealed Atreus' identity. The murals don't just call the boy Loki, they also give Kratos a new name, Fabi. In actual Norse mythology, Faborti is indeed Loki's father, a Jotun whose name roughly translates to cruel striker or dangerous striker. This is a perfect adaptation by Santa Monica Studio. They didn't just pick a random name, they chose the one mythological figure that describes Kratos perfectly. He is the cruel striker of the Greek pantheon, the man who brought down Olympus with his bare hands. By giving him this title, the game perfectly bridges his Ghost of Sparta past with Norse prophecy, making him canonically fit into the role of Loki's father without any loopholes. Faye was insanely strong, arguably one of the most powerful warriors in the entire series. As we mentioned in the first part of God of War Ragnarok facts, she stood toe-to-toe with Kratos during their first meeting, fighting him to a draw, and even pushed Thor to his full potential, a feat almost no one else in the Nine Realms can claim. The real question was, why did Thor fight her? There are many theories regarding this. Faye was an elite Jotun warrior and one of the few survivors of Thor's systematic genocide of her people. She sought vengeance against the god of thunder for the slaughter of the giants. Witnesses in Vanaheim, ghosts encountered in God of War Ragnarok, describe Thor as drunk and sloppy, swinging his hammer wildly through a village. Faye intervened to stop his reckless destruction. As the guardian of Jotnar, Faye was the primary protector of her race, making her a natural target for Thor, who was Odin's primary enforcer tasked with eradicating all giants. Even the Leviathan axe was specifically crafted by Brock and Sindri to counter Thor's Mjolnir. But did you know that Thor is also technically a giant like Faye? Well, more accurately, He is half-giant. This shared heritage adds a twisted layer of irony to their rivalry, suggesting that their battles weren't just about Odin's orders, but a clash of two giants. In both the game and Norse mythology, Thor is the son of Fjörgyn, a Jotun who personified the earth itself. Because of his mother's heritage, Thor is exceptionally large and powerful, even by God standards. This lineage makes his life a walking contradiction. He is a half-giant who spent centuries slaughtering his own people to please a father who despises him. Fjörgyn was one of Odin's greatest loves, and her death reportedly left him heartbroken and lonely for ages, so much so that he later sought to marry Freyja partly to replace the void she left. Specific details of their first meeting are not explicitly detailed in the game's lore. However, it's established that Odin sought to expand his lineage by marrying various women to sire powerful sons. Despite his deep-seated hatred for the giants, he eventually married the giantess Fjörgyn, and together they had Thor. The game's lore hints at a darker reason for Odin's control over him. It suggested that Fjörgyn died, and Odin, being the manipulator he is, likely twisted the narrative to make Thor feel responsible or inadequate without her. In some interpretations of the lore, and reflected in his drunken dialogue, Thor carries the heavy guilt of his mother's death, possibly believing his own difficult birth of his chaotic nature killed her. He drinks to drown the voice that tells him he killed the only person who might have loved him, fueling the rage he takes out on Faye and her people. And before we move on, take a moment and subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty of videos incoming that I'm sure you don't want to miss. Moving on. Heimdall's powers are one of a kind, and so is his origin in the mythology. Although the game doesn't delve too deep into his backstory, he is insanely strong and undeniably strange, possessing a level of foresight that makes him nearly untouchable. But his ability to see everything isn't just a natural talent. It comes from a birth so bizarre it sounds almost like a riddle. In real-world Norse mythology, Heimdall was born of 9 sisters, specifically the 9 daughters of the sea giants Aegir and Ran. The game's lore scrolls and Mimir's conversations allude to this magical union. This isn't just biological trivia, it's the source of his all-seeing nature. Being born of the waves that touch all lands is what gave him his heightened senses. He can hear grass grow and see the future because his very existence is tied to the elemental fabric of the world, making him less of a traditional god and more like a god that can see far into the future. Did you know that in Norse mythology, Odin steals this to gain wisdom? Odin's most famous quote is "Knowledge is a curse." He is known as the All-Father and a god with infinite knowledge, yet his hunger for knowing everything drives him insane. Odin was so knowledge-thirsty that he even hung himself from the World Tree for 9 days and 9 nights. He forbade any other gods from helping him and went without any food or water throughout the ordeal. In actual mythology, Odin didn't just study books. He went to extreme lengths, including theft and deceit, to steal the legendary mead of poetry, a magical brew made from the blood of the wise being Kvasir that granted the drinker infinite wisdom and poetic inspiration. In God of War Ragnarok, this obscure piece of lore is hidden in plain sight as the Kvasir's poems collectibles. While players recognize these poems as clever Easter eggs referencing other PlayStation titles like The Last of Us and the Horizon series, they are canonically significant. Brock's fate is one of the most tragic arcs in God of War, as his death in Ragnarok was final in a way few others are. Long before the games even began, Brock actually died in a smithing accident at the forge. Some lore suggests it was a spider bite during the forging of the Leviathan axe. Unable to let go of his brother, Sindri traveled to the Lake of Souls in Alfheim to steal him back. However, Sindri could only retrieve 3 of the 4 soul parts: form, mind, and luck. The 4th part, direction, was lost. This incomplete revival is the true reason Brock's skin turned blue, a sign of a decaying, walking corpse, though Sindri lied to him for centuries, claiming it was a side effect of handling raw silver with his bare hands. Ironically, it was this imperfect nature that allowed Brock to save the group. Because he lacked direction and social grace, he possessed a blunt, unfiltered perception of the world. He was the only one who realized Tyr was an imposter. The moment came when the fake god called Atreus by his giant name, Loki, and used a phrase that felt fundamentally wrong to Brock's instincts. When Brock confronted him, Odin dropped the charade and fatally stabbed him. The tragedy is that because Brock was missing his direction, his soul could not find its way to the light or any afterlife. Upon this second death, he simply ceased to exist. At his funeral in Svartalfheim, Mimir finally answered the riddle Brock had been asking him all game. What gets bigger, the more you take away. The answer is a hole, symbolizing the void Brock left in the world, in the Huldra legacy, and in Sindri's heart that can never be filled. Starting from Thor's intro till the very end, he is a heavy drinker, and even his family, especially Sif and Thrud, openly despise this habit, viewing it as the source of his failure as a father. But the pain of his addiction isn't just in the writing or the cutscenes, it is physically audible in the performance itself, hidden in the subtle fluctuations of the God of Thunder's speech. Throughout the game, Thor's voice changes depending on his state of mind. It becomes noticeably raspier and more slurred when he's been drinking, a specific detail that the actor, Ryan Hurst, worked on to show the character's internal decay. Conversely, in moments where he's trying to get better for Thrud, his voice clears up slightly, sounding more resonant and kingly. Have you ever wondered what the yellow markings in the God of War universe are? We all know those are phase markings, and they serve as guidance for Kratos and Atreus, helping players identify climbable ledges and breakable walls. But most people assume this is just a video gamey visual aid, not realizing it's actually one of the most touching narrative details in the entire series. The yellow markings that guide you are actually traces of a mixture, likely gold dust of cinnabar, that Faye used to mark the path she saw in her own prophecies. Before she died, she walked the entire journey herself, every cliff, every cave, every ruin, and painted the way for her husband and son. She knew exactly where they would need to climb and where they would get lost. So every time you see that yellow paint, it isn't just a level design mechanic. It's Faye reaching out from beyond the grave to hold Kratos' hand, ensuring her family makes it to the highest peak safely. Heimdall is easily the most cocky and egoistic god in the entire Norse pantheon. He sees everyone as less than him, and he holds a special, venomous hatred for Atreus, whom he relentlessly taunts as little half-breed every chance he gets. But what makes his arrogance so effective isn't just that he mocks the characters. During his boss fight, he actually starts mocking you. Because Heimdall can read minds, the developers programmed him to react to your specific playstyle. He doesn't just taunt Kratos, he taunts the player holding the controller. If you try to spam the same attack button over and over, like mashing R1, he will effortlessly dodge every single swing and say things like, "Is that all you're gonna do? Just keep swinging?" Or, "Predictable." This actually adds an extra layer of realism to the game that makes Heimdall much more than an AI enemy. Odin is a master of disguise, presenting himself as a frail, harmless old man to lower your guard. But if you look closely at his skin, you'll realize that even his physical form is lying to you. You might have noticed the intricate runic markings and crow designs on his arms and head. But what you definitely missed is that Odin's tattoos are not static. They literally shift positions between scenes. In one conversation, a crow might be perched on his forearm. In the next, it has migrated to his shoulder or neck. This isn't a continuity error by the artists. It's a deliberate design choice symbolizing his shifting and untrustworthy nature. Just like his promises, his very skin refuses to stay consistent, a subtle visual warning that the All-Father is never truly showing you his real self. The character of Sif to me is not really well polished compared to the depth given to others like Freya or Angerboda. In the game, she mostly appears as a grieving mother and an angry wife, but her mythological counterpart is central to one of the most famous Norse stories. In the myths, Loki mischievously sneaks into her bedroom and shaves off all of her beautiful golden hair. This little prank is actually the catalyst for the creation of Mjolnir, as Loki had to promise to get the dwarves to forge her new hair and the hammer to save his own neck. Sif originally had a much larger role in a planned civil war subplot within Asgard. The developers intended to showcase the internal fracture of the Aesir, with Sif leading a political faction that opposed Odin's tyranny long before the final siege. She wasn't just meant to be a passive victim of Odin's manipulation. She was supposed to be a key player maneuvering against him from the inside. Unfortunately, this complex political intrigue was simplified for the final act to keep the focus on Kratos and Atreus, reducing her rebellion to a few dialogue lines during the final battle. Although Cory Barlog is my personal favourite director, he was the director of God of War 2 and the reboot of 2018. When it was announced that Cory Barlog would not be directing God of War Ragnarok, I was really concerned about the choice of Santa Monica Studios. While Cory set the emotional foundation, it was Eric Williams, a combat design veteran who has worked on every single mainline game since the beginning, who stepped into the director's chair for Ragnarok. When planning the Norse saga, the team faced a critical decision: make it a trilogy like the Greek saga, or wrap it up in two. Eric Williams and the leadership team made the controversial call to conclude the story in just 2 games. Eric stated that this decision saved them roughly 4 years of development time. If they had stretched it into a trilogy, fans likely wouldn't have seen the conclusion of the Norse saga until 2026 or later. They chose pacing over padding, condensing a massive war into a single explosive finale rather than dragging it out. As the game kicks off, Fimbulvinter is well and truly in motion, and it doesn't just mean snow everywhere. Each realm is suffering its own unique cataclysm. Midgard is buried in sub-zero frost. Svartalfheim is plagued by violent earthquakes and geysers. Alfheim is torn apart by blinding sandstorms, and Vanaheim is overrun by aggressive, poisonous flora. But the most striking visual change happens right at home, where the lake is turned totally frozen. Fimbulvinter is described as a winter of winters where the sun provides no warmth and the seas freeze over. The game uses this mythological detail to explain why the Lake of Nine is now a desert of ice rather than water. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was a mechanical necessity. Freezing the lake turned the central hub from a boating map into a sledding map, allowing for faster traversal and completely changing the verticality of the area, since you can now walk over places you used to row under. Kratos thought Odin kidnapped his son and warns the All-Father to return him. In this incredibly tense standoff, there's a very small secret detail. When Odin arrives and casually attempts to reach out and touch Kratos' spear Draupnir, Kratos instantly snaps the weapon back, a move most fans interpreted as fear that Kratos was afraid Odin's magic might rot the wood or steal the weapon's power. But the real reason is far more cultural and personal. If you watch the scene in slow motion, Odin isn't just reaching for the shaft, he's reaching for the banner tied to the spear. The band was sanctified by the Lady of the Forge herself when she bound the wind within the ring. This makes the weapon holy. It's a god killer, and Odin likely intended to corrupt or nullify its magic with a single touch. However, Kratos' reaction is pure muscle memory from his life in Greece. In Spartan culture, a warrior's weapon is an extension of his soul and his honor. For an enemy, especially a manipulative king, to lay a hand on a Spartan's weapon without permission is a grave insult to his honor. Even far from Sparta, surrounded by snow and Norse gods, Kratos refuses to let this tradition be broken. He pulls the spear away not just to protect the magic, but to remind Odin of his place. You do not touch what is mine. The first time in Helheim when we see reflections of Zeus, Ymir was shocked, asking, "Zeus, is he your father?" He struggles to believe that Kratos is the ghost of Sparta. The stories of Kratos are well known throughout the realms. The destruction of the Pantheon, the bloodshed. There is one specific legend that even the smartest man alive thinks is absurd. The idea that Kratos manipulated time itself. Ymir, usually the one explaining magic to everyone else, cannot wrap his head around the mechanics of Kratos' past, specifically the notion of rewriting history. He brings it up during a boat conversation, saying it's unrealistic. He says, "Brother, what of your story? You faced the fates of your homeland, yeah? The legends I heard about the ghost of Sparta was surely exaggerated. The part where it said you traveled back in time itself to win a battle once lost." He even mentions a theory that Thor hit the world serpent so hard that it sent the snake back in time, using it as a comparison for how impossible it sounds. But Kratos' answer leaves both Mimir and Freya in absolute chills, confirming the terrifying reality of his power. It is true. threads of fate span all life and time. The Sisters of Fate abused their power. When I challenged them, they threatened to undo my existence, so I killed them and turned their power on Zeus. The scene Kratos is mentioning to a shocked Mimir is actually the central plot of God of War 2, a journey that took him to the island of creation to confront his destiny. After Zeus betrayed Kratos, drained his godly powers, and killed him, the Titan Gaia intervened to save him from Hades, revealing that the only way to defeat the King of the Gods was to rewrite history itself. Kratos sought out the Sisters of Fate, Lachesis, Atropos, and Clotho, primordial deities who controlled the threads of fate for every living being, deciding who lived, who died, and who won wars. They possessed the power of the Loom of Fate, allowing them to travel to any point in history or even pull others through time. Kratos didn't just trick time. He broke its rules by physically overpowering the ones that governed it. The battle was multi-dimensional. Atropos, one of the sisters, actually tried to erase Kratos from existence by traveling back to his final battle with Ares and attempting to destroy the Blade of Gods before Kratos could use it. Kratos had to fight her in the present while protecting his past self in a mirror reflection. He ultimately trapped Lachesis and Atropos in a void between time by shattering the dimensional mirrors they used to travel. This was one of the mind-blowing achievements of the Ghost of Sparta. The last one that Kratos killed was the most brutal. You must have seen it in the reels by now. The final confrontation was with Clotho, the massive, grotesque keeper of the Loom. In one of the franchise's most brutal kills, Kratos climbed her massive body, disabled her many arms, and used a sharpened pendulum blade from her own machinery to impale her through the skull. By killing the sisters, Kratos gained total control over the Loom of Fate. He used it to travel back to the precise moment of his death to reclaim the Blade of Olympus, and then traveled even further back to the Great Titan War to bring the Titans into the present, effectively weaponizing time to destroy Olympus. Kratos is really egoistic in the first trilogy, but even later in the series, he remains incredibly proud and refuses to bow down to anyone, be it a god, a king, or a monster. In his entire history, he only knelt down to two people. The first was Ares, a moment that defined his tragedy. Kratos first knelt during the battle against the barbarians. As a mortal Spartan general who had never lost a fight, he found himself seconds away from execution by the barbarian king, Ulrich. Faced with the destruction of Sparta, Kratos screamed to the heavens, "Ares, destroy my enemies and my life is yours." As Ares descended, Kratos knelt in the blood and mud to pledge his soul. Ares accepted, but it was a trap. Kratos was given the Blades of Chaos at this moment, and his fate was sealed. He could never run away from these, and they were permanently wrapped around Kratos' arms, permanently chaining him to the god. This surrender for power ultimately cost him his family, as Ares later tricked him into murdering his own wife and daughter to sever his ties to humanity. In contrast to this moment, where he knelt to gain power, he finally kneels again in Ragnarok, but this time it's to a dwarf. This actually happens at the Forge in Svartalheim after the creation of the Dropner Spear. The Lady of the Forge cannot see Brock due to his unfinished soul, so she leaves without blessing the weapon. Brock is devastated, feeling invisible and worthless. Kratos, recognizing Brock's skill and their bond, insists the weapon needs the blessing of a great blacksmith. He kneels down to Brock's eye level, a shocking gesture for a man who bows to no one and presents the spear. He asks for the blessing of Brock, symbolizing how much Kratos has changed since the days of his ruthless time in Greece. Kratos uses some of the most brutal moves and was really ruthless before coming to these lands. We all remember how he wielded the lightning of Zeus, the soul summoning of Hades, the gaze of Medusa, and the rage of the Titans. For years, we all wondered why he didn't use his old moves in the Norse saga. Some said he didn't want to because of the trauma. Others said he was suppressing them to hide his identity. But the real reason is much more technical and is explained in a missable conversation with Mimir. Mimir finally asks the question we all had.
Brother, I've been meaning to ask. Your homeland. I'd heard the gods there wielded every flavor of power you could imagine. Lightning, fire, the whole lot.
As did I, for many years.
Oh, Any chance you could recall some of that magic?
No, I have tried.
Atreus then explains the reason that magic is actually bound by Earth and that Kratos destroyed his homeland, and the powers went with it. This confirms that magic in the God of War universe is not internal to the god, it is geographically bound. When Kratos destroyed Olympus and flooded Greece, he didn't just kill the gods, he destroyed the source of all those magical abilities. In Ragnarok, Durlin appears to be nothing more than a grumpy, paper-pushing bureaucrat obsessed with safety regulations. But if you look closer at the glowing rune branded on his head and the way he speaks about the past, you realize he is more than that and has a rather interesting history. Durlin was once a high-ranking leader in the Dwarven rebellion against Odin. Alongside Faye, he organized a massive resistance movement in Svartalfheim to stop the Aesir from exploiting the dwarves. The rebellion failed spectacularly, and while many were executed, Odin punished Durlin with mercy, branding his head with a rune of failure and forcing him into a life of humiliating bureaucracy to keep his people in line. The Blades of Chaos is an incredible weapon to use. It's such a unique weapon and really gives you a true feel of an immortal god wielding primordial fire. We all know how they are a curse to Kratos, seared onto his flesh by Ares as a mark of his kneeling down. But what most fans don't know is that there are actually 3 iterations of this weapon throughout the series: the Blades of Chaos, the Blades of Athena, and the Blades of Exile. The first set was taken back by Ares in the first game. The second set was destroyed and remade into the Blades of Exile in God of War 3. So theoretically, Kratos should be wielding the Blades of Exile in the Norse saga. However, the design of the blades in God of War is explicitly based on the original iteration from the very first game, ignoring the upgrades he received later. The canonical explanation is terrifying. The original Blades of Chaos are the true source of the curse. No matter what other weapons he wields, the originals eventually find their way back to him, forcing him to carry the same weapon that killed his wife and daughter forever. The Blades of Chaos aren't just made of sharp metal. They are cosmic anomalies that defy the laws of physics. We all know they burn, but God of War Ragnarok drops a massive lore bombshell that explains why they burn, and it comes from the fire giant Surtr himself. Surtr reveals the shocking reason why these blades are so powerful. They're fueled by primordial fire. This isn't just fire magic, which would have died when Greece was destroyed. It's the original, raw flame of creation that birthed both the Greek and Norse realms. It's the same ancient energy that flows through Surtr's own veins. This explains the pivotal scene where Kratos plunges the blades into Surtr's heart. He wasn't just stabbing him, he was combining the primordial fire of the blades with the heart of the giant to create the Ragnarok entity. They were compatible fuel sources. The blades themselves were forged in the deepest pits of the Greek underworld by Ares. They're likely composed of nether metal, a supernatural alloy capable of channeling the cosmic heat. This is why the blades never get cold. You could submerge them in the ocean or drag them through the absolute zero temperatures of Helheim where the Levine axe becomes useless, and they will still burn. They exist outside the standard laws of nature. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect is that the blades are effectively sentient. It's revealed that they are bound to Kratos' soul, not just his hands. In the time between God of War 3 and 2018, Kratos tried everything to get rid of them. He threw them into the ocean, he buried them, he left them behind, but they always returned. They would mysteriously appear in his house or by his side, a physical manifestation of his sins that refused to let him forget the past. The gameplay hides an impressive foreshadowing that even I didn't notice at first. While we were busy upgrading stats and cooldowns, the game was quietly hitting at the history of these realms. A huge number of the runic attacks are named after famous giants. This is a subtle narrative detail. Odin tried to erase the giants from history, but their legacy survived in the weapons and magic of the world. By using these attacks, Kratos is unknowingly wielding the power of the giants against the Aesir long before he discovers the truth about Atreus or Faye. Starting with my favorite runic attack, Breath of Thamur, named after Thamur, the giant stonemason whose massive corpse is a landmark in Midgard. Valdi's Anvil, named after Ivaldi, a primordial giant known for his craftsmanship. Skadi's Edge, named after Skadi, the Jotun huntress and goddess of winter. Thiazi's Talon, named after Thiazi, Skadi's father and a powerful shapeshifter. Frost Giant's Frenzy, a direct tribute to the rage of the Jotun race. The naming convention extends to other figures who opposed or existed outside of Odin's strict control, further emphasizing the theme of resistance. Njord's Tempest, named after Freya's father, the Vanir god of the sea. Tyr's Revenge, named after the Norse god of war, who is himself half giant and a sympathizer to their cause. Hell's Touch, named after the ruler of the underworld who, in the game, is the giant bird Hraesvelgr. Among the many entries in the series, most people would likely forget that God of War has a game for cell phones, not smartphones, but actual old-school flip phones running Java. God of War Betrayal is a 2D side-scroller released in 2007 that takes place between Ghost of Sparta and God of War 2. In it, Kratos is blamed for the murder of Argos, Hera's pet giant, and hunts down the actual assassin to clear his name. Despite being a pixelated mobile game, it is widely considered canon. However, it contains one of the biggest unresolved plot threads in the franchise. The game never uncovers the assassin's identity. Kratos kills Syrric, Hermes' son, for interfering, but the actual killer of Argos escapes, leaving fans to speculate for nearly 2 decades without an answer. In Ragnarok, the developers were foreshadowing Brock's tragic fate long before Odin's reveal. We all almost saw it coming, how something was fishy, and all of it was building up for this moment. The most heartbreaking foreshadowing comes from Sindri himself, who confesses early on to Atreus that he brought Brock back with an incomplete soul. His guilt isn't just character building, it establishes that Brock is already living on borrowed time, a walking violation of nature that can't last. Then there's Brock's constant, grating distrust of Tyr. While everyone else is happy to have the war god back, Brock is the only one sniffing out the imposter, constantly questioning his passivity and weird behavior. But the biggest dead giveaway wasn't in the story, it was in the game design. The moment Lunda was introduced as a fully voiced, capable blacksmith who could upgrade your gear, the game signed Brock's death warrant. From a mechanical perspective, the developers needed a backup NPC to handle the shop system for the post-game content. Lunda wasn't just a new friend, she was the designated replacement, proving that one of the Holdra brothers wasn't making it to the end credits. Let's talk about the lore of the God of War himself. Kratos isn't a badass rebel figure in myths like he is in the games. It's a classic case of the same name, totally different vibe. While Santa Monica Studios' Kratos is a tragic anti-hero who topples hierarchies, the mythological Kratos, is the ultimate enforcer of the status quo. In actual Greek mythology, Kratos isn't a revolutionary, he's the muscle for Zeus. He belongs to a squad of 4 siblings, Nike, Baia, and Zealous, who are personifications of Zeus's power and are said to never leave the king's side. His most famous appearance is in the play Prometheus Bound, where he coldly supervises the chaining of Prometheus to the rock. Unlike the game character who struggles with his conscience, the mythic Kratos mocks Hephaestus for feeling pity, arguing that everything is a burden except the rule over the gods. The irony deepens when you look at his lineage. He is the son of the goddess Styx. During the Titan War, Styx was the first to rush to Zeus's aid with her children, and as a reward, Zeus made her name the binding oath of the gods and kept her children, including Kratos, as his personal bodyguards forever. The developers admitted the name choice was originally a coincidence. They just wanted a Greek word for strength, but they stumbled into a perfect contradiction. The real Kratos protects Olympus, while their Kratos destroys it. Did you know that Mimir is actually an immigrant? He isn't originally from the Norse realms at all, and the game quietly confirms he's a famous figure from a completely different mythology. His accent almost gives it away. He doesn't sound like the other gods from this realm. When Kratos and Mimir visit the Norns, they don't call him Mimir. They refer to him as Puck and Robin Goodfellow. These aren't random insults, they are his real names. In English and Celtic folklore and Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, Puck is a mischievous nature spirit or fairy known for playing pranks. This confirms that Mimir originally hails from the British Isles, specifically Scotland, given his accent. He didn't start as Odin's advisor. He began as a jester and servant to a fairy king, implied to be Oberon in Celtic pantheon. He eventually travelled north, changed his name, and reinvented himself as the wise scholar we know today. His Scottish accent isn't just a fun casting choice by Alastair Duncan, it's a deliberate narrative clue pointing to his foreign origins. The character of Tyr is full of mystery. From the lore of his travels to his pivotal and confusing involvement in Ragnarok. But if you stop looking at his actions and start looking at his arms, you'll notice that his appearance tells a story that dialogue never explicitly speaks. In God of War Ragnarok, Tyr's tattoos aren't just decorative Norse knotwork, they're a physical map of his life as a world traveler. Unlike the runic tattoos of the Aesir, Tyr's markings are distinctively multicultural, proving he didn't just visit other realms, he learned from them. The most striking details are the Egyptian hieroglyphs covering his left arm. Fans have identified symbols for magic and protection. In the Valhalla DLC, there's a fascinating hint regarding these markings. It's suggested that Tyr used Egyptian magic to regrow his left arm after it was bitten off by the giant wolf dog Garm, or Fenrir in some tellings. This explains why the real Tyr we find in Niflheim has both hands, defying the mythological event where he loses one forever. The tattoos are likely the remnants of the ritual that restored him. When Tyr engages in combat, his tattoos, particularly those on his forehead, glow with a vibrant golden light. In the visual language of the game, gold is the color of the giants. This confirms that Tyr is tapping into his half-giant heritage to fight, contrasting with the blue ice of the axe or the red fire of the blades. His design is a collage of his philosophy. He carries Greek coins from Kratos' homeland and wields weapons from different mythologies, including the katana he wields and the shield from Norse myths in the DLC. He collected techniques, weapons, and markings from every culture he visited, making him the only god who fights not with the power of one realm, but with the wisdom of all of them. The role of Garm in the God of War universe is far more terrifying than just a guard dog of hell. He's a soulless biological calamity, a beast whose every bite tears holes in the fabric of reality, allowing the nightmares of Helheim to bleed into other worlds. When Atreus accidentally releases him, thinking he's saving a mistreated animal, it triggers a catastrophe. Kratos and Atreus are forced to chase the beast across the realms, but they quickly realize that physical violence is useless. You can chop Garm's head off, and he will just regrow it instantly. He's a force of nature that cannot be killed because he has no soul to send to an afterlife. He was so strong that no chain could withstand his power, and Odin ordered the dwarves to create a powerful chain that he couldn't break. Instead of using iron and silk, they used silk thread and infused it with 6 strange magical elements. This leads to the question, if Kratos couldn't kill him, who was strong enough to stop him the first time? It was Tyr, the god of war, who originally chained Garm in the silent clearing of Helheim. Unlike Odin, who would have likely found a way to exploit or destroy the beast, Tyr saw Garm as a creature that was simply misunderstood. He recognized that Garm didn't choose to be destructive. It was just his nature. Tyr chose to imprison him to protect the realms, constructing shackles specifically designed to hold a being of infinite strength. It was a tragic act of necessity, not harming the beast. This is why Atreus was able to transfer the soul of Fenrir into Garm's body. Since Garm was an empty vessel, a body without a soul, and Atreus was carrying the soul of his dead pet wolf Fenrir in his knife, they realized the solution wasn't murder, it was reincarnation. Atreus uses his giant magic to stab Garm, not to kill him, but to transfer Fenrir's soul into the giant, invincible body. The chaotic, world-eating monster is instantly replaced by the loyal, good-natured personality of Fenrir. This effectively tames the beast, giving Atreus a realm-tearing ally for Ragnarok, and explaining why the Fenrir we see in the final battle is really huge compared to the sick wolf we saw at the start of the game. We all remember the Muspelheim realm for its challenging trials, a literal gauntlet of fire where the combat skills of players are tested against the harshest conditions the Nine Realms have to offer. But before it became the ultimate training grounds for Kratos and Atreus, it was a primordial land of heat and ash, home to the fire giants and the genesis of creation itself. In God of War 2018, accessing this realm required you to find 4 Muspelheim language ciphers hidden in purple chests across Midgard and Alfheim. Once Atreus could read the ancient tongue, you unlocked the realm at Tyr's temple. The loop was brutal but addictive. You had to scale the volcano by completing 5 arenas, each with normal and hard stipulations like kill enemies before time runs out or avoid taking damage. At the summit, the Valkyrie awaited, and defeating her unlocked impossible trials to earn keys for the final Sutra's hidden trials, yielding the coveted smoldering embers. In God of War Ragnarok, the access method changed significantly. You needed to find 2 Muspelheim seed halves hidden in legendary chests in Svartalfheim, one at Morvitner's Rig and the other in Alberich Hollow, which required the Dropner Spear. The structure of the trials also evolved into the Crucible. Here, you complete specific combinations of trials at 3 similar swords to unlock a central Nornir chest and 6 final challenges at the main sword, including the grueling 99 enemy endurance trial and a boss rush. Post-game, this arena becomes the site of the ultimate showdown against the new Valkyrie Queen, Gnar. However, the realm isn't just for optional challenges. In Ragnarok, we visit Muspelheim twice for critical narrative reasons. First, we go there as Atreus alongside Thor, an unlikely duo searching for a piece of the Shattered Mask. Later, Kratos and Atreus return to find Sutra speaking at the Spark of the World, convincing him to combine with his wife Sinmara's heart, or in the final version, using the Blades of Chaos to become the Ragnarok entity that destroys Asgard. Runic attacks in the game are essential tools that can turn the tide of battle, offering specialized magical strikes for each of Kratos' weapons. Every weapon, the Leviathan Axe, the Blades of Chaos, and the Dropner Spear have their own unique slots for light and heavy runic attacks, adding incredible versatility to your arsenal. This system allows you to build Kratos differently for every encounter. You can focus on crowd control, high single target damage, or stun locking enemies. It's completely up to the playstyle of the player. Hell's Touch is my personal favorite and widely considered one of the best light runic attacks for the Leviathan Axe. It's simple yet devastatingly effective, a quick burst of energy that interrupts enemy attacks and deals massive stun damage, making it perfect for opening up combos or stopping a boss's unblockable wind-up. For the Leviathan Axe, other top-tier picks include Evaldi's Anvil, which frees all enemies in a radius, and Breath of Thamur, also a heavy runic attack, which creates a massive area of effect storm. For the Blades of Chaos, the Nemean Crush is perfect for a light runic attack, which sends out a shockwave of fire that launches enemies, while Meteoric Slam is also another option for the heavy runic attack, which rains down fireballs for massive damage. When it comes to the Dropner Spear, Mountain Splitter fires long-range wind blades that stagger opponents, and Artillery of the Ancients rains down spears from the sky, priming enemies for a massive detonation. Placing something in the far corner of the map is like asking players not to spot it, but for those willing to explore the edges of the world, Alfheim hides a secret cavern that most people miss completely. To find it, you must locate a thin, easily overlooked passageway through the Hjarta that leads into the vast open area called the Forbidden Sands. If you travel all the way to the bottom corner of this desert, you will discover a secluded cavern containing a legendary chest protected by a complex puzzle. You are met with a blockade of Hive Matter and Twilight Stone. Use the exposed Twilight Stone to bounce your Leviathan Axe and destroy the Hive Matter on the right. The second stone is covered in Hell's Bramble, meaning your axe is useless against it initially. You must use sigil arrows and the Blades of Chaos to burn the bramble away. Once the stone is clear, you have to line up a precise angle to bounce your axe off both Twilight Stones in a chain reaction to break the final hive, granting you access to the chest and the rare loot inside, often hardened war handles or similar high-level gear. Muspelheim holds a hidden gem that many players rush past on their way to the next upgrade material, secret conversations with Sutra himself. If you linger at the spark of the worlds before the final events, the fire giant eventually shares fragments of his touching love story with Sinmara, the giantess of Niflheim. Cut content and deep lore reveal a poetic and tragic detail about their relationship. Sutra and Sinmara literally carry each other's hearts. Sinmara's frozen chest holds Sutra's cold, dormant heart to keep it safe, while Sutra's burning chest protects hers. This exchange is why they can't simply unite. Their union, and the union of their hearts, is the catalyst for Ragnarok itself. They're forced to remain apart to keep the world alive. Atreus eventually asks the question we've all had since 2018. Why did you create the Muspelheim challenges? Sutra's answer is hauntingly simple. They helped pass the time. This response highlights the sheer scale of his existence, an immortal being standing alone in a realm of ash, creating gauntlets of death just to stave off boredom while he awaits eons for his destiny to destroy Asgard. Sutra isn't the only relic of ancient history hidden in the game. If you track down the lost pages of myth scattered across the realms, you can unlock the blueprints for legendary sword hilts, relics of famous swords from Norse mythology like Dainsleif, Tyrfing, and Angervedel. Unlike standard gear, these hilt relics give players game-changing abilities like summoning poison waves or shock waves that completely alter battle strategies, rooting Kratos' power in the ancient history of the North. Muspelheim's fiery crucible goes beyond simple combat challenges. It hides some of the game's most rewarding secrets behind a test of pure skill rather than exploration. Unlike every other Nornir chest in the realms where you hunt for hidden bells or totems, the Crucible's chest is unique. It requires blood, not puzzle solving. You must conquer 6 specific challenges across 3 arenas marked by giant swords, and your reward isn't just Hacksilver. It's a Chaos Flame, essential for maximizing your Blades of Chaos. Along the way, you also earn the Undying Pyre's armor set, which is perfect for mid-game progression. And unlike normal chests that stay empty, the legendary chests here are renewable. The one at the start holds 1,000 Divine Ashes, a crucial resource for upgrading your equipment to god tier levels. But the real secret lies in unlocking the final challenges. Once you beat the initial trials, a massive golden sword rises in the central arena. But it doesn't just give you a list of fights, you have to solve a combat puzzle. The game secretly asks you to perform specific combinations of the smaller arena trials to unlock the elite modes. For example, clearing Arena 1 and then Arena 2 triggers the Endurance Challenge, a grueling gauntlet against 99 enemies, while combining Arena 3 and Arena 2 unlocks the Boss Rush, where you battle 5 elite monsters consecutively. The game doesn't tell you these recipes directly, you have to either experiment or carefully watch the glowing runes on the floor to figure out which combination summons which punishment. While the main story ends with the fall of Asgard, the emotional journey of God of War Ragnarok doesn't truly conclude until you complete the favor, a Viking funeral. This hidden quest, available only after the credits roll, serves as the game's true ending and offers the closure that the main campaign denies you. The quest begins quietly at Reb's Tavern in Nidovella. The music is subdued, and the usual hustle of the dwarves is replaced by a somber gathering. Lunda, Reb, and Derlin are drinking to Brock's memory, sharing stories not of a legendary blacksmith, but of a difficult, brilliant, and loyal friend. It grounds the high fantasy war in a very human moment of grief. The procession moves to the Sverd Sands, where Brock's body is placed on a boat, a traditional Viking send-off. The atmosphere is heavy. Kratos, usually stoic, helps push the boat out into the water, a gesture of profound respect for the dwarf who armed him for 2 apocalypses. Freya then steps forward, using her magic, specifically a flaming sigil arrow, to help ignite the pyre, sending Brock to the beyond in a blaze of glory, exactly what he deserved. The most heart-wrenching moment is the unexpected arrival of Sindri. He is no longer the pristine germaphobe we know. He is disheveled, covered in grime, and utterly broken. He doesn't say a word to Kratos or Atreus, He simply stares at the fire, his eyes hollow. When Kratos attempts to offer a hand of comfort, Sindri flinches and teleports away. It's a stark reminder that some wounds don't heal, and not every story ends with forgiveness. As the fire burns out and the screen fades to black, the game rolls its second, final set of credits. This time, the haunting track Blood Upon the Snow by Hosier plays, signaling that the saga of the North is truly over. The world continues, but it's quieter, and the absence of the blue dwarf is felt in every forge you visit thereafter. Svartalfheim's industrial landscape might look like a mining arena or an industrial zone, but for the eagle-eyed explorer, it hides some of God of War Ragnarok's most lucrative secrets. The realm's winding waterways and vertical mountain terrain make exploration a mix of platforming puzzles and treasure hunting. The Bay of Bounty isn't just a scenic waterway, it's a literal power-up zone. Hidden on the Alberic Island, which you can't fully explore until you acquire the Drapna Spear in the Forging Destiny quest, lies a trove of high-tier loot. You have to use the spear to trigger a wind vent on the right wall, launching you up to a legendary chest and Nornir chest that early explorers can only stare at in frustration. But the water itself holds power. As you paddle through the bay, you can find 4 Yggdrasil's dews hanging from branches. These aren't just collectibles. They're permanent stat boosters giving a +2 cooldown, defense, strength, and runic respectively. The runic dew near Alberic Island remains tantalizingly locked until you complete the Reckoning, making the bay a location you must revisit to reach your full potential. The heart of this exploration is the In Service of Asgard favor, picked up at Reb's Tavern. This quest isn't just about clearing up the environment, it's about shutting down 3 complex mining rigs that test every aspect of your gameplay. Modvitnir's rig is the most critical for completionists, as the wooden tower at its summit hides half of the Muspelheim seed needed to unlock the combat area. Radzvin's rig forces you into a brawl with venomous grims and nightmares, while Altiof's rig serves as a vertical maze. The Valhalla DLC serves as a nostalgic trip to the original trilogy, a surreal journey where Kratos must literally battle the demons of his past to heal his future. It's a dream come true for longtime fans, as we see the older, bearded Kratos coming face to face with his younger, rage-filled self. The DLC doesn't shy away from the brutality. It forces Kratos to look at the monster he was and acknowledge him rather than hide away from him. The ending provides one of the most powerful visual callbacks in gaming history. The throne Kratos sits on at the very end of the DLC isn't a Norse design, nor is it Odin's throne. It's a perfect replica of his original throne from the end of God of War 2005. When he takes this seat, the symbolism is staggering. He is physically returning to the position of the God of War, but emotionally he has transformed it. By sitting in the exact same chair where he once stewed in bitterness and hate, but doing so with a calm mind and a desire to serve as a god of hope, he symbolizes that he has finally made peace with his origins. He hasn't erased the past, he has mastered it. Helios isn't just any forgotten god from the Greek pantheon. He's the original head that Kratos carried around, serving as a gruesome lantern long before Mimir came along to offer wisdom. In God of War 3, he had one of the most annoying voices in the series, arrogant until the very end when he pathetically begged Kratos to spare him, a plea that was silenced when Kratos ripped his head off with his bare hands. You couldn't stop yourself from hating him then, and the developers made sure you'd hate him even more now. In the Valhalla DLC, Helios makes a shocking return, not as a resurrected god, but as a hallucination manifesting in the place of Mimir. For entire sections of the roguelike mode, Mimir's head is replaced by Helios, who relentlessly mocks Kratos. He insults his redemption, calls him a hypocrite, and constantly reminds him of the monster he used to be. What makes this verbal sparring sting so much is the continuity. The taunting head of Helios is voiced by Crispin Freeman, the exact same actor who voiced him in God of War 3 back in 2010. They didn't just hire a sound-alike, they brought back the original voice of Kratos' guilt, making the insults feel like a genuine echo from the past that Kratos can't simply ignore. The clean-shaven Kratos from the original trilogy isn't just a design choice, it's the face of a man with nothing to lose. the more ruthless and unapologetic version of Kratos. Without the beard to soften his features or hide his expressions, he looks more aggressive and raw. In the Norse saga, Santa Monica Studio gave him a thick, rugged beard to symbolize his age, his wisdom, and his attempts to cover up the monster he used to be, quite literally masking his past. But did you know that they brought back this look of Kratos in the DLC? Completing the Valhalla DLC unlocks the young Kratos appearance, officially called the Classic appearance. This isn't just a simple texture swap, it completely changes his model to match his Greek sculpted physique. It replaces his aged, weathered skin with the smoother, ash-covered complexion of his youth, removes the abdominal scar from the Blade of Olympus in God of War 2, and brings back the iconic goatee. While many fans believe it changes his voice filters, the reality is even more respectful. Christopher Judge, Kratos' current actor, refused to voice the young Kratos' lines or try to imitate the original actor, T.C. Carson, out of pure respect for his predecessor's work. So while you get the younger look, you keep the older, wiser voice. Valhalla offers a unique combat experience that completely reinvents the God of War formula, transforming the methodical action of the main game into a high-stakes gauntlet. In this mode, Kratos is stripped of his fully upgraded arsenal and forced to improvise with randomized loadouts, where death resets your progress but grants permanent knowledge. Relics or hilts function differently here than in the main campaign, forcing you to be strategic rather than spamming abilities. Instead of having a cooldown, relics now have a set number of charges per run. Once empty, they're useless until you purchase a refill at a tablet or endeavor. You don't bring your gear. You choose one of the 3 random relics from a pedestal at the start. There's a special mystery perk that, when destroyed, grants the collector's memory. This chaotic upgrade gives you an infinite random refresh of relics every time your current one runs out of charges, turning Kratos into an unpredictable weapon of mass destruction. Certain glyphs are designed to talk to each other. For example, a glyph that increases spear detonation damage will trigger twice if you have the spear momentum glyph equipped. Perhaps the most interesting mechanic is the existence of cursed relics. These offer massive buffs like a 100% critical hit chance, but come with penalties, such as losing 5% of your health every second, forcing you to play aggressively to survive. The trials are the core loop, designed to test Kratos' mastery over his past and present. You move through randomized rooms themed after the 9 realms, defeating enemies to earn glyphs and runic attacks. To advance, you must hunt down Valhalla's chosen elite mini-bosses found in sanctuaries. In the upper levels, the environment shifts to a recreation of the original Greek games. Here, you face timed arena challenges to earn points needed to unlock the final door. Each run concludes with a duel against Tyr. Unlike a standard boss, Tyr changes his fighting style every time you reach him, wielding legendary weapons from foreign lands, like a Japanese katana, to test Kratos' ability to adapt. These trials aren't just for sport, they're a psychological journey. Kratos is invited to Valhalla not to fight, but to reflect. He encounters echoes of his old life, such as the beheaded Helios or the Oath Stones of Ares. The ultimate goal isn't victory, but acceptance, transitioning from a god of destruction into a god of hope. Tyr almost killed me dozens of times before I finally beat him, and I'm not alone. What makes him so difficult isn't just his massive health bar or his variety of weapons, it's his memory. Unlike every other enemy in the game that follows a strict script, Tyr is studying you while you fight him. Tyr is the only boss in the game who remembers your patterns across the phases of the fight. The AI is programmed to recognize your moves and their pattern. If you spam runic attacks in the first phase to get quick damage, he is statistically more likely to use a specific runic shield move or aggressive interrupts in the second phase to shut that strategy down. This sets him apart from the toughest bosses in the franchise. With Sigrun or Gnar, the difficulty lies in memorizing their movesets. With Tyr, the difficulty lies in his memorizing of yours. You can't autopilot this fight with the same combo loop. You have to evolve your strategy in real time, just as he does. The mask is one of the most hidden aspects of the game. The story doesn't explicitly tell you what it is, why Odin needs it, or why he's so obsessed with it. However, analyzing the nature of the All-Father reveals that it has everything to do with ultimate knowledge. Whatever was inside the rift asked Odin to look for the mask to get the answers for the knowledge of existence itself, and it would grant Odin the ultimate knowledge and answer of all his questions. So Odin, being Odin, went on an expedition to solve the mystery of this mask. The Mask of Creation is the central mystery of God of War Ragnarok, serving as a primordial artifact that predates all the way back in history and acts as a key to a rift of creation. Odin discovered this rift after famously killing the mirror, a chaotic event that cost him his eye when he tried to look inside. He became consumed by the rift, believing it held the secrets of life, death, and the very birthplace of reality. But he needed the mask to look into it safely without being destroyed. He found the first piece after a brutal voyage that killed his entire crew, eventually tracking the other fragments across the realms. It was most likely that Odin sacrificed everyone one by one, as he saw fit. He returned to the Norse realms with a piece of the mask with the same energy he felt from the rift. This was where Odin hit a roadblock, as he was unable to find the rest of the pieces of the mask or to solve this mystery to find the answers he was looking for. It wasn't until hundreds of years later that he met Atreus and started again to find the remaining pieces. Odin was ultimately right in this regard, that the rift was connected to the existence of all the realms, as the clues that are written on the mask are in all sorts of languages, meaning it's a universal mask. It also meant that the mask isn't only connected to the Norse realms, but also to all the other mythological lands that exist in the God of War universe. What makes the mask truly fascinating is that it proves the existence of a connected universe. The artifact is etched with 3 distinct ancient languages: Ancient Greek, referencing smoldering earth, which is Muspelheim; Japanese, describing a dance of the vortex; and Egyptian hieroglyphs, detailing a great journey of transformation. This confirms that the mask and the knowledge it unlocks belong to a higher being of existence that connects all mythological worlds, potentially hinting at where the franchise is heading next. At the climax of the story, Atreus chooses to shatter the mask rather than use it, which destroys all of Odin's plans as the pieces are sucked into the rift, sealing it forever. Interestingly, the object has no basis in actual Norse text or the Eddas. Visually, the wooden mask with its green markings is a deliberate Easter egg nod to the 1994 Jim Carrey film The Mask, where the chaotic artifact is famously referred to as the Mask of Loki. This meta joke is layered with serious lore implications, particularly regarding the rift's glowing green hue. A popular fan theory notes that this color is identical to the spectral, higher existence form of Athena seen in God of War 3, suggesting that the rift might lead to the same transcendental plane where she now resides, or that she is an entity manipulating these events from within the void. This connection deepens during a specific conversation between Kratos and Mimir regarding the mask's unknown origins. Mimir speculates about a figure known as the Silent Matron. This title is incredibly revealing, because in Norse mythology, the Silent Matron often refers to the goddess Gefjon, who was famously a virgin goddess. Who else is the virgin goddess in God of War lore? Athena. In older scholarly literature, Gefjon is frequently cited as the Norse equivalent of Athena. This implies that the game isn't just reusing colors. It's subtly hinting that Athena, or a version of her, has been influencing the Norse world long before Kratos arrived, potentially acting as the architect behind the rift itself. Since the mask's origins are multicultural, it's widely theorized that Atreus' future journey will involve finding the mask's original creators in lands like Egypt or Japan. The higher existence is mentioned once before Ragnarok by Athena, who claims she has been brought to a higher plane by Zeus's death, or rather, by her own sacrifice. But what exactly is this higher existence? It's the most significant unanswered mystery in the series, hinting that the gods we know, Odin, Zeus, and Kratos, were merely servants or enforcers in a much larger, incomprehensible cosmic hierarchy. The strongest evidence for this higher plane comes when Athena, after her death, returns not as a memory, but as a translucent green astral form. She claimed she had reached a higher plane of existence. The spectral green energy of Athena's ascended form is a perfect visual match for the emerald light emanating from the mysterious rift in Odin's basement in Ragnarok. Many lore hunters believe the rift is a literal portal to the dimension where Athena now resides. If Odin had successfully looked through it, he likely wouldn't have found infinite knowledge in the abstract sense. He might have come face to face with the Greek goddess of wisdom, or the incomprehensible entities that hide her. The real question is, what is the higher existence? The game suggests that just as humans serve gods, gods may serve or be created by a primordial force. In Ragnarok, we learn about 4 parts of a soul: form, mind, direction, and luck. The higher existence is theorized to be the source or the reservoir where these soul components originate before they're assigned to living beings. Mimi explains that the world tree, Yggdrasil, exists across all realms simultaneously. Some fans theorize that the higher existence is actually the consciousness of the world tree itself, a unity that connects all mythologies into one singular creative force. This name Unity does ring a bell, right? There's a fascinating tear in reality theory regarding Tyr. Tyr's tattoos and multicultural weapons suggest he was searching for this unity long ago. His pacifism in Ragnarok might stem from him seeing a glimpse of this higher truth, realizing that all these petty wars between pantheons are meaningless on the grand scale of the cosmos. Some even argue a meta theory that the higher existence is the real world, and the mask allows a character to see the blueprints of their own fictional creation. If the rift is a door to the higher existence, the mask was the key to every answer it had to offer. Odin lost his eye because he tried to look at this ultimate truth without a filter. The mind of a god, while powerful, cannot process the infinite complexity of a high dimension. The mask was designed to translate the incomprehensible data into something a god could understand. Odin's obsession wasn't just power, it was fear. He believed the higher existence held the answer to what happens to a god when they truly die, since they don't go to Valhalla or Hell. He was terrified of the void and sought assurance from the realm above. We all think that Odin might never return. After all, we saw his soul get smashed into dust by Sindri as he was taking revenge for his brother Brock. It feels final. It should be final. But if we stay in the Norse realms or explore the metaphysical laws established in the near future, he could make a comeback. And boy oh boy do I have some theories regarding it. Firstly, we look at how he dies in the game and in the myths. The game presents his death as a definitive 3-stage process designed to make him look powerful and not so easy to kill. After a massive battle outside the Great Lodge, Kratos, Atreus, and Freya awaken the Allfather. Crucially, Kratos refuses to kill him, choosing to be better and leaving Odin's fate to the family he abused. Atreus uses giant magic to perform a soul whisper. As Odin refuses to abandon his obsession, Atreus draws his soul out of his body and traps it inside a small soul marble. While the protagonists debate what to do with the marble, Sindri, consumed by grief over Brock, snatches it and smashes it with his hammer. This implies permanent destruction, preventing him from reaching any afterlife. In the original Norse mythology, his death is much more interesting and very much different. He is fated to fight the giant wolf Fenrir and is swallowed whole. He is then avenged by his son Vidar, who rips the wolf's jaws apart. The game subverts this by having Atreus, who is Loki, the father of Fenrir, to do the trapping, and Sindri act as the executioner. In the current canon, Odin is dead. However, the magical rules of the universe leave massive loopholes. Odin spent centuries staring into the rift of creation, obsessed with the infinite knowledge inside. Some fans speculate that a part of his consciousness may have been slipped into that green dimension before his soul was smashed. If the rift is where souls originate, smashing his marble might not have destroyed him. It might have simply put him back to the source, where he now exists as pure energy. As seen in the Valhalla DLC, Yggdrasil remembers everything. Kratos fought a perfect recreation of Helios purely because the memory of him existed. It's highly probable that an echo of Odin, a psychological manifestation of Kratos and Atreus' trauma, could return as a memory of an antagonist. In mythology, Odin's ravens are Hugin, thought, and Munin, memory. In the game, Odin effectively is his ravens. He sees through them and projects his voice through them. If his thoughts and memory were not in the marble when it was smashed, but were instead out in the world watching, then Odin might make a return. And for this, I have a very specific theory that supports it. The reason I'm mentioning the ravens specifically is that in this universe, they're not just pets. They are literal extensions of Odin's own consciousness. And during the final boss fight, there's a specific scene that catches the eye and leads many to believe that the All-Father's survival might be due to the ravens themselves. During the high-stakes battle, Freya catches Odin and locks him in a stranglehold of Vanir magic. In this specific high-tension situation, where his life is on the line against an immortal god, a giant, and a witch, Odin does something bizarre. Instead of focusing all his magic on breaking the hold or attacking Freya directly, he deliberately releases his ravens out into the sky. Why would the god of wisdom waste precious seconds releasing birds moments before his potential death? At first glance, it looks like he sends a raven at Freya to distract her and free himself. But Odin is a master of magic. He could have used a Bifrost Blast or a spell to break the hold much faster. The theory suggests he wasn't trying to distract Freya. He was trying to free the ravens. He wasn't throwing a weapon. He might be saving his life. If we read the lore of these ravens in-game, we read that these ravens were captured by Odin and he bound them to his will. If Odin realized he was about to lose, his priority wouldn't be saving his body, but saving his mind. By ejecting both of his ravens from the battlefield before Atreus could trap his soul in the marble, he essentially uploaded his consciousness to the cloud. Odin isn't a fool. He's the most paranoid preparer in the 9 realms. If his thoughts and memory were not in the marble when Sindri smashed it, but were instead safe in the sky watching the events unfold, then the idea of Odin is still alive. As long as his memory persists, he isn't truly gone. He's just waiting for a new vessel. The game's early trailers showed us a young Atreus who was obsessed with answers, constantly asking Kratos about prophecies, while the Spartan wanted nothing but peace for his family. In the beginning, Loki mentions how he has a role in Ragnarok, and it's not sitting doing nothing. He was right, but the role he played was completely different from the one written in the ancient texts. The games reimagine Loki not as a villain, but as a bridge between the warring races of the 9 realms. As a champion of the giants and a god of Greece, he represents a unique hybrid. His ability to speak to animals and understand any language allows him to build alliances that Odin never could. In the games, Odin tries to make Loki his puppet. Atreus' role is to resist this destiny. Instead of starting Ragnarok out of vengeance or chaos, he triggers it to liberate the realms from Odin's tyranny. The game gives Loki the unique role of life giver. He accidentally creates Jormungandr by putting a giant soul into a snake, and he saves Fenrir by transferring his soul into the body of Garm. At the end of Ragnarok, Atreus leaves Kratos to find the remaining hidden giants scattered across other lands, setting the stage for future games where he acts as a shepherd rather than a destroyer. The mythological Loki is a far more ambiguous and dark figure. He's not the son of a war god, but the son of giants Farbauti and Laufey. His role is far more different. He often gets the gods into trouble through his schemes, but then uses his shape-shifting and wit to solve the problem, usually providing the gods with their greatest treasures, like Thor's hammer in the process. He is known as the god of mischief for a reason. His tricks are something to behold in the myths. In the myths, Loki is the literal biological father of Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel. He didn't create them through soul magic. He fathered them with the giantess Angrboda in the Ironwood. The mythological Loki is directly responsible for the death of the beloved god Balder. As punishment, the gods chain him to a rock with the entrails of his own son, where venom drips onto his face. During Ragnarok, he breaks free and leads the army of the dead against the Aesir, ultimately dying in a duel with Heimdall. Same as in the myths, Heimdall hates Atreus, calling him a half-breed. But in the game, his father is enough to kill Heimdall and not let this happen. The first time we set foot in Alfheim in God of War 2018, we see the Light Elves and Dark Elves locked in a brutal war. Atreus, with his curiosity and his nature to help, asks Kratos if they should help, to which the Spartan wisely replies that they shouldn't interfere because they only know one side of the story. We initially see the Light Elves as innocent victims, but the reality is much darker. Their story is a tragic cycle of war. Originally, the elves were a simple race living in equality until the discovery of the Lake of Souls. Centuries ago, a group of elves began basking in its radiant light, and this prolonged exposure physically transforms them into the luminous beings we know as light elves. Those who did not bask became dark elves. They remained closer to their original nature and viewed the light elves' obsession as a dangerous addiction that was draining the realm's natural resources. The war isn't as simple and straightforward as categorizing it as good versus evil. It's actually industry versus nature. The light elves want to harness the light for knowledge and architecture, while the dark elves believe it must be stifled to preserve the ecosystem. The conflict was briefly halted by the arrival of the Vanir god Freyr, who accidentally wandered into the Lake of Souls while in a drug-induced stupor. When he emerged, the elves mistook his glowing appearance for a divine blessing and worshipped him as the Lord of Light. Freyr used this influence to establish peace, and under his rule, the Ring Temple was built. However, this golden age collapsed when Freyr abandoned Alfheim in a rage after his sister Freya married Odin. Feeling betrayed, he left the realm without a leader. Without his presence, the Dark Elves immediately attacked to reclaim the light, slaughtering the Light Elves and restarting the cycle of violence. In the first game, Kratos and Atreus unintentionally changed something that shouldn't have happened. They turned back in favor of the Light Elves by killing the Dark Elf King, Svartalfur. However, true resolution only came in God of War Ragnarok when Freyr returned to face his mistakes. He successfully convinced both factions to put aside their centuries-long hatred and form a truce to fight their common enemy, Asgard. After the fall of Odin, the elves remained united, finally ending their endless war. The Blade of Olympus is such a cool-looking weapon, and even more interesting is the lore behind it, which adds more importance to the weapon itself. How it returns in this game is such a shock because everyone assumed it was rusting at the bottom of the Aegean Sea. It was originally forged by Zeus from the heavens and the earth to end the Great Titan War. It was the ultimate weapon of the Greek pantheon. Seeing Kratos wielded again in the Norse realms isn't just fan service, it's a narrative bombshell. The way Kratos interacts with the blade has shifted from a physical burden to a spiritual manifestation. It tells how much the weapon and even Kratos have come a long way. In God of War 2 and 3, the blade was a physical object Kratos had to carry on his back. To wield it, he had to literally infuse his own godly essence into the metal, making him mortal in the process. It was a high-risk, high-reward nuclear option capable of one-shotting titans. In Valhalla, Kratos doesn't carry the sword around. Instead, it's tied to his Spartan rage. By selecting the legacy path, he summons the blade out of thin air when his rage meter is full. His entire moveset shifts to a heavy two-handed style that perfectly mirrors his combat animations from earlier games when he wielded the same weapon, allowing him to perform the signature overhead slams and energy thrusts that old fans have burned into their muscle memory. But the real question we all were thinking was, how did it end up in Valhalla? Valhalla is a realm that operates on the consciousness and memories of those who enter it. The blade likely appears because Valhalla draws directly from Kratos' internal thoughts. It manifests because it's the most significant object of his past, representing both his absolute power and his absolute guilt of killing the gods and living the life he lived since he used it to kill his father and destroy his homeland. While canonical lore suggests Kratos abandoned the physical blade in the ruins of Greece after using it to release hope to humanity, a fascinating theory suggests it returned because it's soulbound. Because Kratos poured his divine soul into the blade in God of War 2, the weapon might be spiritually bound or connected to him forever. This implies the blade in Valhalla isn't just a memory, but a part of Kratos' own divinity that he calls forth from within himself, much like how Mjolnir answers Thor. In the God of War universe, the spark of the world is the primordial ground zero where the realms of Muspelheim, the Fire Realm, and Niflheim, the Ice Realms, meet. It's the absolute center of creation, a swirling vortex of pure energy that predates even before the Aesir, the Vanir, and even the Giants. It represents the game's version of the Big Bang Theory, following the mythological concept of the Gununga Gap, the great void where the heat of the south collided with the cold of the north to form the first life, like the ancestor giant Ymir. According to Mimir, the sparks that flew out from this primordial forge didn't just fade away, they became the sun, the moon, and the stars in the sky. The energy here is so volatile that only a primordial being like Sutra can stand near it without being unmade. It serves as the ultimate power source, which is why Sutra must use it to transform into the Ragnarok entity. By combining his own fire with the frozen magic of his lover Sinmara within the spark, he creates a reaction violent enough to destroy Asgard. This leads to one of the game's most emotional scenes when Ragnarok itself is created. The game remains intentionally silent on who created these first ones, leading to fascinating theories. Similar to the Greek primordials, Gaia and Uranus, Sutra and Sinmara are likely personifications of nature who emerged as soon as the universe understood the concept of hot and cold. However, given the existence of the mask of creation and its multicultural symbols, many fans believe the spark was ignited by the same higher existence that created the rift in Odin's basement. This suggests an eternal cycle. When a world dies in Ragnarok, the energy returns to the spark, waiting to eventually ignite a new creation. Similar to the Greek primordials Gaia and Uranus, Sutra and Sinmara are likely personifications of nature who emerged as soon as the universe understood the concept of hot and cold. However, given the existence of the mask of creation and its multicultural symbols, many fans believe the spark was ignited by the same higher existence that created the rift in Odin's basement. This suggests an eternal cycle. When a world dies in Ragnarok, the energy returns to the spark, waiting to eventually ignite a new creation. Heimdall is made pretty similar to the myths, from his role as the Watchman to his unbearable arrogance, but the most interesting details are found in his physical appearance. Santa Monica Studio leaned heavily into his mythological title as the Shining God, Gulintani, creating a character who literally and metaphorically looks down on everyone with a golden gaze. In Norse mythology, Heimdall is famously described as having gold teeth. Gulintani literally translates to gold tooth. While many adaptations ignore this weird detail, the game pays homage to it in a clever way. If you look closely at Heimdall's character model during cutscenes, especially when he sneers, his teeth have a distinct, unnatural yellow-gold tint. It's subtle, but it's there. The game expands this golden theme to his entire being and adds more to his visual aura. He has glowing golden Bifrost eyes, gold armor, and he summons a golden magical realm shift. His entire demeanor is shining, representing his obsession with perfection and his belief that he is untainted compared to the dirt of Atreus and Kratos. Heimdall carries the hilt of Hofudh, a sword that he rarely draws, not because he prefers peace, but because he believes no one is worthy of seeing it. He fights with his bare hands and his foresight to humiliate his opponents, only using his blade when he is truly backed into a corner and when Kratos finally lands a hit. But the most dangerous tool on his belt isn't the sword, it's the horn. In the myths, Gjallarhorn is used to be heard by the heads of all men when blown. The game takes this poetic description and gives it a magical physics kind of explanation using the resonance of the Bifrost. The horn doesn't just make a loud noise, it literally hacks the frequency of the world tree itself. By tapping into the Bifrost energy that connects the realms, the horn uses the branches of Yggdrasil as a conductor. This explains how a single breath from Heimdall can be heard across different dimensions simultaneously. In reality, it isn't just sound traveling through air. It's a vibration traveling through reality itself. When Kratos eventually blows the horn at the start of Ragnarok, what he does is that he isn't just signaling an army. He's shaking the foundation of the Nine Realms to wake up every living soul, dead or alive. God of War Ragnarok isn't the first time Kratos has told Destiny to go to hell. He doesn't believe in a written script. In the original God of War 2, he literally traveled back in time to butcher the Sisters of Fate, ripping the magical threads of his life out of their hands to change his history. But when he seeks out the Norns in the Norse realms, he finds that you can't kill their prophecy with swords because they don't weave magic. They use logic. Norns Urd, the past, Verdandi, the present, and Skuld, the future, reside at the Well of Urd in Midgard. Unlike the mystical Sisters of Fate of Greece, These are comparatively bored, cynical entities who mock Kratos not with riddles, but with psychoanalysis. They reveal a brilliant subversion of the web of fate. There is no grand design. The Norns explain that they are essentially master psychologists. They claim that people are so enslaved by their own natures, traumas, and habits that their choices are entirely predictable. As they coldly tell Kratos, "You are a destroyer, you will always destroy, it is your nature," their prediction is just a massive data analysis that predicts the most likely outcome based on past behavior by analyzing the decisions of Kratos and his past. When Kratos and Freya visit them, the Norns deliver grim predictions. Heimdall intends to kill Atreus, Asgard will fall, and Kratos will die. But Kratos proves them wrong not by fighting them, but by changing his nature. At the climax of the game, when he has Odin at his mercy, the Destroyer algorithm predicts he will kill him in a rage. Instead, influenced by Atreus and the memory of Faye, Kratos chooses mercy. He stops himself, hands the choice to others, and chooses this time to be a protector. By making a choice that his old self never would have made, he broke the predictive model. The prophecy of his death was erased not by magic, but by growth, leading to the final mural where he is worshipped as a beloved god, a future the Norns deemed statistically impossible and were completely unable to predict. Although Ironwood sections are boring, mostly consisting of riding a slow yak through a swamp while picking fruit, it has some interesting lore. We can't deny its importance to the story. In fact, this hidden sanctuary is the crucible where the entire fate of the world is rewritten, acting as a place of primal power and secrecy in both the game and even in the ancient texts. In the original Norse mythology stories, Ironwood is a terrifying literal location in Jotunheim where the trees have leaves made of solid iron. It is the dark heart of the giant realm and a home to a clan of powerful witches and the breeding grounds for the wolves that will eventually consume the sun and moon. The game converts this metal forest entirely. Instead of a grey, metallic wasteland, Santa Monica Studio turned Ironwood into a lush, vibrant, color-filled jungle filled with pink and orange flora. The iron in the name refers not to the trees, but to the resilience of the giants. It is an impenetrable stronghold hidden behind a magical veil that even Odin's ravens cannot breach. The area is vital because it redefines Angerboda's role as well. She isn't the mother of monsters raising beasts to kill gods. She is a lonely guardian preserving the soul marbles of her fallen people. However, Ironwood is narratively critical because it's where Atreus truly learns to be Loki. It's here he discovers the Shrine of Groa, which reveals the true prophecy of Ragnarok and the fated death of Kratos, and where he unknowingly births the cycle of time. In one of the game's most pivotal moments near Ironwood, Atreus places a giant soul into a soulless snake in Grilla's cellar, unknowingly creating the world serpent centuries before he's supposed to exist. All the fans of the franchise were wondering how Santa Monica Studio changed the fate of Kratos. Wasn't he supposed to die? We all saw the wall in 2018. It was as clear as day. What happened to that? Well, they didn't just remove it all of a sudden. They explained it beautifully within the game's lore through the existence of two different murals that define Kratos' journey. The mural in the 2018 game gave all of us chills and nightmares as well. We find this mural at the very end of the game, behind a hidden curtain that only Kratos sees. It depicts the entire journey Kratos and Atreus had just completed. However, the final panel, which Kratos saw but hid from Atreus, showed Atreus holding a dying, pale Kratos and visibly telling that Kratos will die. This mural represented the fixed fate that the giants and Odin believed in. It's predicted that Kratos, being a destroyer by nature, would eventually die fighting Thor or Odin, leaving Atreus to serve Asgard. The twist comes at the very end of Ragnarok. After the final battle, Atreus discovers a hidden shrine behind the original one. Unlike the first mural painted by the giants based on calculation, the back of this shrine was painted by Faye herself. It depicts Kratos destroying the original prophecy of his death. But the true emotional gut punch is the final panel. It shows Kratos standing tall, not dead, but being worshipped by people across the realms, not out of fear, but out of love and reverence. We all know the Easter eggs behind each of Kvasir's poems and how they bluntly reference other PlayStation classics. When you pick up a poem and read it, you will instantly realize that they serve as a direct callback to the classic titles. Kvasir poems serve as a fun meta-joke celebrating Sony's library. But did you know the dark mythological origin of the author himself? In the game, Kvasir is just a scholarly figure from the past, but in Norse mythology, his creation is far more visceral. Kvasir was a being made from the combined saliva of the Aesir and Vanir gods. To seal their truce after the Great War, both sides spat into a vat. From this mixture, Kvasir was formed. He was the wisest being alive. There was no question he could not answer. However, his life ended brutally. Two dwarves, Fiala and Gala, grew jealous of his wisdom. They murdered him and drained his blood, mixing it with honey to create the mead of poetry. Anyone who drank this mead would instantly become a scholar, gaining the gift of poetry and infinite wisdom. This explains why, in the game, Kvasir's books are scattered across the realms. They're fragments of the wisest being who ever lived, knowing stories even from all PlayStation universes that shouldn't exist. I wanted to wield Thor's hammer and was waiting for it the entire game, only to realize that Santa Monica Studio had other plans. It felt Mjolnir would play similarly to the Leviathan axe, with the throw and return mechanic and elemental damage, so they opted to give Kratos the original Draupnir spear instead, a weapon that fits his Spartan heritage perfectly. But that doesn't mean the hammer disappears into the void. You can actually find it in a secret post-game scene that redefines the future of the Aesir. After the credits roll and the main story concludes, if you travel to the canyons in Alfheim and walk toward Lunda's shop, you will trigger a hidden cutscene. Kratos and Mimir witness Thor's daughter, Thrud, standing over Mjolnir, which has crashed into the desert sands after the explosion of Asgard. In the God of War universe, worthiness works differently than in the Marvel movies. Mjolnir doesn't have a magical spell that prevents people from lifting it. It is simply too heavy and volatile for most beings to handle. As the daughter of Thor and Sif, Thrud possesses immense Isis strength, but that isn't enough on its own, which we saw when Thrud and Atreus visit Helheim. She possesses an insane level of strength for a kid of her age. A popular theory suggests that the hammer chooses a master based on their will. Throughout the game, Thrud struggles with her father's alcoholism and Odin's manipulation. By the end, her resolve to protect her mother and rebuild her family's legacy gives her the spiritual weight needed to tame the weapon. She lifts it, struggling at first, then mastering it, and flies off into the sky to begin her training as a Valkyrie. In the original Norse myths, Mjolnir is inherited by Thor's sons, Magni and Modi, who survive Ragnarok to help rebuild the world. But since Kratos killed both of them in the 2018 game, the developers gave the honor to Thrud. This makes her the daughter of Thunder and the sole heir to her father's power, effectively redeeming Thor's bloodline through her. Lifting the hammer was the physical proof of her strength, but her heart was always set on a different title. For Thrud, wielding Mjolnir is just the means to an end. Her true ambition was never to be a god of thunder, but to join the ranks of the most elite warriors in Asgard. During the sections we play as Atreus, both bond really well, and we get to see this side of Thrud where she tells Atreus and her family repeatedly that her sole purpose is to be a Valkyrie. Before the war, Thrud was desperate to join the Valkyries, but this dream eventually turned into a war. Odin used her dream as a manipulation tactic. He used her to spy on Atreus, a move only Odin can pull off. Thor and Sif were terrified. They weren't trying to hold her back, they were trying to save her. Sif, in particular, knew that Odin treated his Valkyries not as elite warriors, but as disposable tools for his war machine. They refused to let their daughter become just another weapon to be used and discarded by the Allfather. After the destruction of Asgard, Thrud finally achieves her goal, but it looks very different from what Odin promised. Instead of serving a tyrant like Odin, she joins the new order of Valkyries led by Sigrun and Njord's successor. Their mission shifts from harvesting souls for an army to genuinely protecting the realms, which they were always duty-bound to. By wielding her father's hammer while wearing Valkyrie armor, she becomes a terrifying hybrid of styles. The raw, crushing force of an Aesir combined with the aerial grace and discipline of a Valkyrie. In the post-game, seeing her training in Alfheim symbolizes that she has moved out of her mother's shadow. She didn't need Odin's permission to be a hero. She just needed to believe she was worthy. Eagle-eyed players have noticed a fascinating detail in her combat animations. Even before she gets the title, while she accompanies Atreus in Helheim, her moves already mimic Valkyrie techniques such as high jumps, diving strikes, and heel slams. This suggests she has been secretly training herself for years, observing the Valkyries from a distance, readying herself for the role long before destiny handed it to her. We can learn about Thrud through her mother in Vanaheim. After the credits roll, you can find Sif in Vanaheim, specifically at Freyr's camp. She is no longer the bitter, high society goddess of Asgard who looked down on everyone. Stripped of her palace and her husband, she is transformed into a pragmatic diplomat and the leader of the refugees of Asgard. When you speak to her as Kratos, the conversation is surprisingly touching. Sif expresses a mixture of pride and relief regarding Thrud's location in Alfheim. She admits that she was wrong to try to shield Thrud by keeping her small and hidden away. She acknowledges that Thrud's strength was always meant for something greater, beautifully stating that she is glad her daughter is finally finding her own thunder. Sif isn't just sitting around mourning Thor. She is actively working with Hildisvini to ensure the Isa refugees are treated fairly by the Vanir. It's a delicate political dance. Sif, the widow of the man who butchered the Vanir, is now the bridge preventing a second war between the survivors. She has become the leader Thor could never be, proving that the legacy of her family isn't just strength, but survival. It's a bit of irony, but it also tells that no matter what happens, you can always try to fix the wrongs your family did. The battle between the ghost of Sparta and the god of thunder is so brutal and violent that it technically ended as a draw, but not before Kratos broke Thor's teeth and left a permanent scar on his belly. But the real question lies here. Isn't Thor a god? Can't he heal his own wounds? We saw Kratos heal himself instantly in the fight against Baldur in 2018, and we even saw the skin knit back together visually. So why is the god of thunder walking around with an open wound years later? The reason goes way back to the first game, to a scene which we thought held no value. In the first game, when Kratos first meets Jormungandr, the giant snake swallows the Leviathan axe and then spits it back out. If you looked closely at the UI in that moment, a notification briefly pops up. Aitra imbued. Aitra is a primordial liquid and the only substance potent enough to truly kill or permanently wound an Isa god. It is what eventually kills Thor in the myths. Because the axe was mixed with the world serpent's venom, the hit Kratos gives across Thor's belly was poisoned at a much more divine level, nullifying his healing factor and leaving a mark that magic couldn't erase. Aside from the poison, the nature of the weapon itself plays a role. The Huldra brothers forged the Leviathan axe to be the equal and opposite of Mjolnir. The frost magic in the blade is so intense that it doesn't just cut flesh, it freezes the spiritual tissue. Mimir hints that wounds from such high-level elemental weapons leave a stain on the soul, keeping the injury static as it is. There is also a tragic psychological reason. Throughout Ragnarok, Thor is a broken man, struggling with self-loathing and alcoholism. This scar represents the first time a mortal, as Odin calls Kratos, actually matched his strength and drew blood. Some lore theorists believe Thor's own lack of will to heal, his internal belief that he is a failure, keeps his physical body from mending the mark. The wound acts as a visual testament that even the strongest god in the Nine Realms can bleed. What is even more satisfying is to see the way Kratos uses this wound to his advantage. During the final battle with Thor, there is a moment when players get a prompt to either press R1 or R2 to damage Thor. By pressing R1, Kratos uses the Spartan tactics to use the enemy's damaged areas to his advantage, landing devastating blows to his belly. Now, how did Kratos become immortal and when did he gain his power? We just talked about how Thor couldn't heal, yet we've seen Kratos snap his own neck back into place and close open wounds in seconds, and even heal like it's some sort of magic. And the wounds he had were never there. Is it a spell, a curse, or just good genes? Kratos' immortality is actually a mix of divine birthright, stolen powers, and a literal refusal to die. There's a long-standing theory that traces his healing back to God of War 2. In that game, Kratos frees the Titan Prometheus, who was being tortured by Zeus's eagle, having his liver eaten every day, only for it to regenerate. When Kratos burns Prometheus to death to end his suffering, the ashes grant him the rage of the Titans. Many fans believe this transfer of essence gave Kratos his healing factor because Prometheus's defining trait was regeneration. While a cool theory, game mechanics suggest this mostly just boosted his durability. The truth is much more biological. As the son of Zeus, Kratos is a demigod and later a full god. In this universe, gods possess natural regenerative abilities, but they just work differently from Wolverine's. His healing is tied to his rage. Even as a mortal Spartan, he survived things that should have killed him at the moment. In the 2018 fight with Boulder, we see this clearly. Kratos is battered, bloody, and visibly exhausted. But the moment he gets really angry, you can visually see the cuts on his arms knitting themselves back together. He isn't using some sort of spell. He is manifesting his divine nature to survive, the very Spartan nature. I think that Kratos is immortal in 3 different ways due to 3 different curses, making him nearly impossible to keep down. Firstly, the divine aging. The gap between God of War 3 and the 2018 game is estimated to be centuries, possibly even a millennium, yet he remains in his physical prime. Secondly, in the death loop, Kratos has been killed multiple times, from being impaled by Ares, betrayed by Zeus, and beaten to death by Thor. Each time, he literally crawls out of the afterlife. His will is so strong that neither Hades nor Helheim can contain his soul. And lastly, the Curse of the Blades. It is strongly hinted that Kratos is cursed to walk the earth forever. At the end of God of War 3, he tried to commit suicide to release hope to the world. He impaled himself with the blade of Olympus, a wound that kills titans. Yet he survived. The universe, or the higher existence, simply won't let him die. Interestingly, Cory Barlog confirms that the older version of Kratos in Ragnarok is actually stronger than his younger Greek-killing self. He just holds back. His immortality has shifted from not dying to surviving everything. He can only be killed if he truly gives up his will to live, which, knowing Kratos, isn't happening anytime soon. The Dropna, or the Dripper as we know it, isn't just a cool looking golden ring. It is actually really special and important to both the God of War story and even the myths. While it started as a symbol of infinite wealth, Santa Monica Studio brilliantly reimagined it into the only weapon capable of killing a god who can see the future. They totally reimagined the real purpose of this ring. In the original myths, Dropna was forged by the dwarven brothers Brokra and Eitri, better known as Sindri in game, during a contest to create the most impressive gifts for the gods. Known as the Dripper, the real power was in its magic, which was simple but potent. Every 9th night, 8 new gold rings of equal weight would drip from the original, meaning the ring replicated itself. It represented infinite wealth and the sovereignty of Odin, who possessed it. It even played a tragic role in the funeral of Balder, where Odin placed it on his son's pyre as a final sign of honor. The game transforms this symbol of greed into a legendary weapon specifically tailored for Kratos. Kratos needed a weapon to counter Heimdall, whose foresight made him impossible to hit. Rock, in a stroke of genius, suggested repurposing the original Dropna ring. Kratos travels with Brock to the Lady of the Forge in Svartalfheim. She combines the ring with a spearhead, a drop of Kratos' godly blood, and the sound of the wind. The resulting Dropna spear retains the ring's ability to duplicate. Because the spear can replicate infinitely and detonate on command, it overloads Heimdall's senses. He can predict one spear, but he can't predict the mathematical chaos of infinite explosions. This is the first weapon in the series forged specifically for Kratos. It isn't a cursed blade from Ares or an axe inherited from his wife. It's a spear, honoring his roots as a Spartan general. The red cloth tied to it even features a subtle Greek key motif, making it the perfect antidote to Odin's dark and manipulative spear, Gungnir. The development of this game has some insane and mind-blowing secrets that show just how much obsession went into every pixel. Firstly, some of the designs of the enemies are actually inspired by unused designs of old enemies that the studio never used before. For example, the Grimms, the lizard-like wretches, were evolved from concept art of imps and smaller enemies that were cut from previous Greek-era games. They finally found a home in the Norse realms as these wretched little pests. The entire mechanics of the Leviathan axe, specifically the recoil, were born from an early prototype where developers were testing Thor's hammer animations for Kratos. In the early stages of the 2018 development, before the axe was finalized, they prototyped a weapon that could be thrown and recalled to simulate Mjolnir. They loved the snap of the return so much that they built an entirely new weapon, the axe, around that single animation. So every time you recall the axe, you are effectively playing a Thor simulator that was designed years ago. The beard of Kratos isn't just a texture, it's a technological marvel. While not motion captured in the traditional sense because you can't put dots on hair, it was rigged with dynamic bone physics. The developers gave the beard its own collision detection and wind resistance. It reacts to the environment in real time. If the wind blows in Helheim, the beard freezes and stiffens. If Kratos runs, it has weight and momentum. They effectively treated the beard as a separate character to ensure it was never clipped or looked dead during emotional scenes. That satisfying sound when Kratos calls his axe and hits his hand feels so natural because the sound design is a masterpiece of layering and mixing different sounds together to make it realistic. You are absolutely right about the nature of the sound. It is a mix of a deep sound of breaking ice for the frost element, and a crack that mimics thunder. But the real magic is the flight sound. The whoosh you hear when the axe flies back to you is actually a recording of the axe flying away, but played in reverse. This subconscious audio trick makes the return feel much more magnetic. Kratos calling the Leviathan axe is visually even cooler than Thor calling Mjolnir. While Thor often uses a lazy, arrogant finger snap to summon his weapon, treating it more like a servant that must obey, Kratos uses a disciplined, forceful extension of his arm. He puts his whole body into the recall, but there is a tragic layer to Thor's relationship with his hammer that most players miss. We see Thor snap his fingers constantly to summon Mjolnir, a sign of his absolute confidence. But there's a theory that in his lowest moments, after the bar scene, Thor's lying down drunk. He extends his arms calling Mjolnir, but doesn't answer. Throughout the game, Thor struggles with his addiction. He promises his daughter Thrud and his wife Sif that he will stop drinking, but when he relapses the Great Lodge, drowning his guilt in mead, his bond with everything around him fractures. The theory suggests that Mjolnir, which was forged with powerful magic, is angry at Thor. It isn't just any weapon. It's a magical artifact that respects strength and conviction. When Thor breaks his promise to his family and falls back into the bottle, he loses his conviction. In these moments of drunken weakness, the hammer becomes physically and spiritually heavier for him. He doesn't listen to the call because the man who wields it is no longer the mighty god of thunder. He's a broken father who lied to his child. The weapon's hesitation is a subtle, heartbreaking confirmation that Thor has lost the respect of the only thing that never left his side. After the credits roll, if you return to the frozen wastes of Midgard and travel to the far northeast near the king's grave, you will find a high peak known as the Eternal Campfire. Here, you unlock a side quest that seems simple on the surface. Prepare a meal by finding 4 ingredients scattered across the realms, but it hides the most heartbreaking real-world story in the entire franchise. The mission asks you to find specific ingredients to finish a recipe. To find these items, you don't follow a map marker. Instead, you have to look for colorful hand-painted heart shapes on rock walls. Inside each heart are 2 runic initials. These aren't random textures, they stand for 2 real people. According to the team at Sony Santa Monica, this entire quest is a permanent memorial to Jake Snipes and Sam Hendrick, 2 developers who met and fell in love while working at the studio. They were inseparable, bonding over a shared love of baking and traveling the world together. In the game, they are represented by the characters Yari and Somar, which mean conflict and summer in Old Norse. Tragically, Jake passed away in 2020 due to complications from epilepsy in his sleep. Sam, his partner, wanted to leave a piece of himself in the game they built together. The developers created this quest to honor Jake's memory. The quest mirrors their life, traveling across the realms to find ingredients for a meal. When you finally complete the recipe at the campfire, you are rewarded not with a weapon, but with a permanent stat boost called Meal of Comfort, a warm, eternal reminder that love transcends death. Shordra is a rare example of a normal mortal who finds himself stuck in the affairs of the gods. His presence in the game serves to humanize the stakes of Odin's manipulation, reminding us that while gods play chess, mortals are the real pawns or puppets of these higher beings. but the most interesting detail lies in his name and his post-game obsession. In God of War Ragnarok, as one of the Midgardian refugees granted sanctuary in Asgard, he wasn't saved out of kindness. Like the other refugees, Shildra was part of Odin's human shield strategy, a strategy to use others to save himself. Odin brought mortals to the walls of Asgard specifically to make it harder for Kratos and his allies to launch an all-out attack without feeling like monsters. Atreus meets Shildra upon arriving in Asgard. Unlike the gods who were constantly testing him, Shildra offered genuine low-stakes companionship, an optimistic, slightly clumsy kind of teenager who just wanted to belong but was stuck with these gods. After the destruction of Asgard, everything in Asgard was out of place. The normal mortals were left with no home or shelter. Sif took the responsibility of taking care of these refugees, but you can find Shildra back in Midgard at the derelict outpost, engaged in a task that is both hilarious and tragic. He is frantically trying to pry gold coin out of a wooden pillar. This isn't just random loot. It's the very same coin Odin gave to Atreus as a manipulative gift earlier in the game. Shildra is obsessed with it, not just for the wealth, but as a memento of what he lost. He also awkwardly asks Kratos about Thrud, revealing that he developed a massive crush on the Thunder God's daughter during his time in the realm of the gods. It's a bittersweet moment showing that while the universe was ending, Shildra was just being a normal teenager in love. The game hides a royal destiny in plain sight. In Norse legend, also known as Shield-Shefing, is a legendary figure who becomes the first king of the Danes. His name literally means shield. The game pays homage to this by having him survive the collapse of Asgard, essentially shielded from the apocalypse, and shows him attempting to claim a relic from a stone. The Dropner Spear isn't just a random weapon. It holds a secret that I'm kinda surprised nobody's mentioned. Everyone thinks the Blades of Chaos are the first weapons Kratos actually wields since he's been using them since God of War 1 and even God of War Ascension. But if you're a God of War nerd like me, you would know that Ghost of Sparta is the first canon game that digs deep into Kratos' past. In that game, the first weapon Kratos uses is, you guessed it right, a spear and shield. It's a massive irony that they brought it back in Ragnarok, not as a new toy, but as a return to his roots and to how it all started. Kratos famously wielded the Arms of Sparta in the 2010 PSP title. While it felt like a cool gameplay addition back then, lore-wise, these were Kratos' general's arsenal, the weapons he used as a mortal leader long before he pledged his soul to Ares. In the series lore, Kratos explicitly states that a Greek spear was the first weapon he ever learned to use as a child in the rigorous Spartan agoge. In Ghost of Sparta, these weapons weren't found in a chest. They were returned to him by the last Spartan, a loyal soldier who'd kept Kratos' personal equipment safe for years while Kratos was busy being a god. What's mind-blowing is that the Arms of Sparta were essentially the prototype for Dropner, both mechanically and spiritually. In the PSP game, you could imbue the spear with Thera's Cinder, which allowed Kratos to throw spears that would go on to stick into enemies and explode with fire. Does that sound familiar? It's the exact same mechanic as the Dropner Spear in Ragnarok, proving that Brock and Sindri didn't just invent a new combat style, they recreated the one Kratos was most comfortable with. The story of the original spear is deeply tragic. After the final battle against Thanatos, Kratos leaves the Arms of Sparta at the grave of his brother, Deimos, on the Suicide Bluffs. By accepting Dropner and Ragnarok, Kratos isn't just getting a new weapon, he is finally picking up the part of himself he buried with his brother all those years ago. Although the Dropner Spear was forged by Kratos and Brock specifically for his hand, almost all of the rest of the weapons he used were stolen from the cold, dead hands of the gods he slaughtered. Kratos didn't just defeat his enemies, he looted and took their weapons and included them in his arsenal. In the Greek saga, Kratos was a walking arsenal of stolen divinity, ruthlessly stripping gods and heroes of their signature tools to facilitate his quest for revenge. Firstly, he stole the Blade of Olympus from his father Zeus by literally traveling back in time to the moment of his betrayal. This massive blade contains Kratos' own poured-in godly essence and remains the nuclear option of his inventory, capable of wiping out armies with a single swing. He didn't stop there. During his duel in the underworld, he ripped the claws of Hades from the god of the dead himself, using them to tear out Hades' own soul and navigate the river Styx. He took the massive lion-headed Nemean cestus from his half-brother, Hercules, after beating him to a pulp, the only weapons capable of shattering onyx shields. In one of the most gruesome scenes in gaming history, Kratos mercilessly amputated the messenger god's legs to acquire the boots of Hermes, granting him the ability to run up walls. Finally, he ripped the sun god's head off with his bare hands, using the head of Helios as a living lantern to blind enemies and reveal hidden paths. He didn't break this habit in the Norse realms either. He did the exact same thing with Heimdall. After killing the Watchman in Vanaheim, Kratos looted the hilt of Hothuth from his corpse. Known as a powerful relic in-game, it allows Kratos to utilize the Realm Shift ability. When activated, it creates a time-distorted real shift that slows down time for everyone but Kratos, effectively mimicking Heimdall's own speed and foresight. It allows the player to steal the very power that made the boss so annoying to fight in the first place. The most shocking return in the Valhalla DLC wasn't the Greek enemies, the dark setting, or even the Blade of Olympus, but it was Helios. In the original games, the head of Helios was one of Kratos' most gruesome tools, while his return in the Valhalla DLC serves as a haunting manifestation of Kratos' guilt. In God of War 3, after Kratos brutally decapitated the sun god with his bare hands, the head remained alive enough to emit divine light, and Kratos used it like a literal flashlight. He would hold it by its hair to illuminate dark caves, force it to emit massive bursts of light to stun enemies, and use the light of Helios to reveal hidden doors obscured by Olympian magic. It was a haunting scene in the original games, but in Valhalla, he returns not as a physical object for solving puzzles, but as a psychological reminder to Kratos of what he did, because as we know, Valhalla is a realm of trials. It pulls from Kratos' memory, causing Helios to appear as a floating, spectral head that actually replaces Mimir during certain runs. Unlike the silent tool from the Greek saga, this version is extremely talkative and mocking, serving as Kratos' internal critic. He constantly reminds the Spartan of his past atrocities, calling him a monster and questioning his right to be a leader. Speaking of Helios and the psychological torture he inflicts, there is one specific location in Valhalla where this trauma reaches its breaking point, a place that represents the absolute peak of Kratos' morality. The psychological horror peaks in the recreation of the Chamber of Sacrifice, where Kratos is forced to choose whether to put Helios in the cage, effectively making him the face of cruelty for his younger self to resolve the ghosts of his past. In the original 2005 game, Kratos traveled to Pandora's temple to retrieve the box with the power to kill Ares. The temple was a gauntlet of lethal puzzles, but one stood out for its sheer cruelty. Kratos found a terrified Athenian soldier trapped in a cage. The room required a blood sacrifice to open the path. Instead of finding another way, Kratos had to push the cage up a steep incline while fighting off hordes of undead enemies. The soldier begged for his life the entire time, screaming about his family back in Athens. Kratos didn't just ignore him, he treated him like a piece of furniture. Once at the top, Kratos pulled the lever, lowering the soldier into a furnace and burning him alive just to open a door. It was the definitive moment that showed Kratos cared for nothing but his revenge. In the DLC, this room returns not as a puzzle, but as a mirror. The game forces Kratos to recreate the moment, often with Helios taking the place of the soldier to mock him. It serves to deconstruct the ends justify the means philosophy. In the original, the goal was to kill a god at any cost. In Valhalla, the goal has changed. Now it is to heal. To solve the puzzle this time, Kratos refuses to sacrifice another. In a powerful subversion of the original mechanic, he enters the cage himself or holds the mechanism open, taking the full force of the fire. He chooses to burn rather than let another innocent die, proving that the monster of Sparta is finally dead. Since we saw Zeus in the 2018 game, we were all wondering whether Kratos would come face to face with Greek gods again, even his memories. While Athena returns to haunt his thoughts, the Valhalla DLC serves as a nostalgic trip down to the PS2 and PS3 era, literally resurrecting the armies of Olympus to test the Spartan one last time. As you venture deeper into Valhalla, the environment shifts to mimic the white marble and gold of Greece, and with it comes an enemy we thought was extinct. It was a nice little reminder for our childhood memories. Perhaps the most haunting addition is the return of the sirens. Just like in the desert of God of War 1, you actually have to follow their singing to find and kill them, a mechanic that instantly transports veteran players back to 2005. The subterranean wraiths also return with their annoying burrowing attacks, and the centaurs gallop in to trample you. They feel really similar to the new enemy type introduced in Ragnarok, forcing Kratos to adapt to his new heavy combat style to these agile old-school threats. Mimir, being the smartest head alive, often comments on these creatures, noting that such monstrosities are not of these lands. He realizes these are constructs of Kratos' memory, physical manifestations of thousands of monsters he butchered. From a design perspective, it's a brilliant blend of assets. While some enemies like the Cyclops share skeletal rigs with Norse enemies like ogres, they have unique animations and moves that mimic their original PS2 attack patterns, creating a perfect hybrid of modern gameplay and retro nostalgia. The Valhalla DLC serves as a love letter to the OG fans that played old school games and spin-off titles as well, and from it returned a specific item. One more thing returns that represents the heaviest chain Kratos ever wore, and it brings a deep cut from the lore of God of War Ascension. In the lore, the Oath Stones were artifacts of absolute servitude created by the Furies, the sisters who punished anyone who broke a promise to the gods. When Kratos made his desperate deal with Ares to save his life in exchange for his soul, the Furies created an Oath Stone to act as a spiritual contract. It was a terrifying object because if Kratos ever tried to break his word, the stone allowed Furies to track him down and inflict eternal torture on his mind and body. To finally break free from Ares' control in the prequel game, Kratos had to kill his friend Orcos, the keeper of the stone, meaning his entire journey of vengeance actually began with the tragic sacrifice of an innocent ally who just wanted to help him. In the Valhalla DLC, however, this stone returns not as a physical trap, but as a psychological manifestation of his past burdens. Kratos encounters the Oathstone during his trials, symbolizing the exact moment he surrendered his soul to the God of War. In a brilliant twist of gameplay, you can actually equip the Oathstone as a perk, and instead of binding you, it empowers your rage. This signifies Kratos taking the memory of his slavery and channeling it into raw, focused power. It serves a therapeutic purpose, forcing Kratos to admit a hard truth. While Ares manipulated him, Kratos was the only one who chose to make the oath. By using the stone rather than running from it, he accepts it as a part of his history rather than a source of shame. It's a detail so central to his character that if you look at the main menu artwork for the original games or the Ascension cover, you can often see these stones in the background, a constant reminder that Kratos' identity for years was defined by being a slave to his own word. Apart from the Nidhogg dragon boss fight tied to the story, did you know that there is also another hidden dragon boss fight that you absolutely missed? While most players walk right past the massive stone statue on Dragon Beach in Svartalfheim, thinking it's just scenery, it's actually a dormant boss waiting to be woken up. To unlock this encounter, you first need to acquire the Drupner Spear during the main quest. Once armed, you must travel to the Lake of Nine in Midgard and destroy a glowing ice wall near Tyr's temple to find the mystical heirloom. This relic seems useless at first because it has no combat power, but its true purpose is to awaken magical stone statues. When you take this heirloom back to the petrified dragon on Dragon Beach and activate it, the stone shatters, releasing the Everlasting. This secret boss is unique because it utilizes both fire and frost breath attacks, forcing you to constantly switch between your Leviathan axe and the Blades of Chaos to counter its elemental shifts. Defeating it is the only way to get the rare dragon claws needed to fully upgrade the dragon-scaled armor, making this useless relic the key to one of the best strength builds in the game. Dream sequences of Kratos serve a very important role in the story of Ragnarok, but they also unveil a rather old story that the old fans of the series might have forgotten, the origin of the massive, jagged scar on his stomach. This mark represents the moment he survived the unsurvivable, originating from one of the most iconic scenes of the series at the beginning of God of War 2, when Zeus tricked Kratos into draining his godly powers into the blade of Olympus. Once Kratos was mortal and weakened, Zeus took the sword and impaled him through the stomach, twisting the blade to ensure his death. The wound was brutally reopened at the end of God of War 3 when Kratos intentionally impaled himself with the same blade to release the power of hope to humanity. While the scar is present throughout the Norse games, the Valhalla DLC makes it a focal point. In the dream sequences, the lighting is specifically designed to highlight the wounds and exit points on his torso, making it look significantly fresher and more recessed than the faded ash on his arms. The narrative uses this physical deformity as a symbol, with Helios and the Norns mocking him by suggesting it is a hole in his soul that can never be filled. Despite Kratos' divine healing factor, this scar remains permanently because it was caused by a weapon forged from the heavens specifically to kill immortals, leaving a permanent stain on his spiritual form that he finally accepts in the DLC's conclusion, not as a mark of shame, but as a testament to his survival. In God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, the environment isn't just a random collection of Greek assets. It features 3 specific riffs that transport Kratos into his most traumatic memories and give nostalgic memories to all of us fans, effectively serving as theaters of his past sins. The first rift takes you back to the Aegean boat, the setting of the very first mission in the entire franchise, where Kratos fought the Hydra. In the DLC, this arena represents his indifference. Facing waves of enemies on those familiar wooden decks reminds him of the time he let the boat captain fall to his death simply because he had the key he needed, viewing innocent lives as nothing more than obstacles. This is the same boat we see in the 2018 God of War, when Kratos visits Helheim to face the Bridgekeeper but is stuck in it. The second drift transports you to the Desert of Lost Souls, the vast, scorching wasteland from the first game where Kratos had to hunt down and kill sirens to hear their songs and find Pandora's temple. In Valhalla, this arena symbolizes his obsession, forcing him to relive the madness and toil he endured and the lives he extinguished just to gain the power to kill a god. The final and most difficult rift is the Forum, the massive circular arena from God of War 3, where Kratos fought Hercules. This location represents his familial guilt, reflecting the intense rage and sadness of brutally caving in his own half-brother's face with the Nemean cestus. Found in the upper shore area, surviving these challenges is essential not just for the massive amount of fleeting echoes they provide for upgrades, but because clearing these echoes of the past is the only way to fill the progress bar required to unlock the final duel with Tyr, proving that Kratos cannot face his future until he survives his history. Speaking of Hercules, Kratos mentions him in the DLC, but there's a surprising twist that separates this memory from the others. This is one of the few acts of Kratos that he does not regret, and he has all the right reasons for it. In Valhalla, during a conversation with Tyr, Kratos is asked directly if he regrets taking the life of his half-brother. His answer reveals just how much his wisdom has grown. He explains that he feels no guilt because Hercules was dangerous and sought the title of God of War for every reason but the right one. To understand why Kratos feels this way, you have to look at who Hercules was. He wasn't a hero in the end. He was a man driven mad by an inferiority complex and blind ambition. Hercules felt his legendary 12 labors were ignored by Zeus, while Kratos was handed glory. He viewed killing Kratos as his unofficial 13th labor, believing that by murdering his brother, he would finally replace him and become Zeus's favorite son. Kratos admits to Tyr that Hercules was more like me than I care to admit, a powerful warrior consumed by uncontrollable rage. But unlike Kratos, who sought vengeance, Hercules sought power and gratification. Kratos recognized that a god fueled by such selfish desire was a threat that had to be neutralized. When they met in the arena, Kratos actually tried to de-escalate, telling him this is not a quarrel between us, brother. Hercules left him no choice, sending waves of enemies before jumping in himself. The fight ended with Kratos brutally using the Nemean cestus to beat Hercules to the floor, destroying the arena. Tyr actually compliments Kratos for this stance. He notes that Kratos' ability to distinguish between those who deserve mercy, like the boat captain, whom Kratos deeply regrets killing, and those who are genuinely dangerous, like Hercules, is the ultimate sign of his growth as a leader. He knows now that sometimes, for the greater good, a monster must be put down. Pandora is one of the most sacred things in the God of War universe. In the past, the entire story revolved heavily around her, and her spiritual return in Valhalla marks the final step in Kratos' evolution. To understand her importance in the story, you have to realize that Pandora was not born. She was forged from the flame of Olympus by the blacksmith god Hephaestus. Zeus originally ordered her creation not as a child, but as a biological key designed to seal away the evils of the Great War. fear, greed, and hatred within the legendary box. However, a tragedy occurred when Hephaestus grew to love his creation as his own daughter. To protect her from Zeus, he hid her away, claiming she was a failure. But when the king of the gods discovered the ruse, he imprisoned Pandora in the labyrinth and tortured Hephaestus for his deception. In God of War 3, the dynamic shifted when Kratos sought to open Pandora's box a second time to gain the power to kill Zeus. The box was protected by the flame of Olympus, a divine fire that would incinerate anyone who touched it. The cruel irony was that only Pandora could pacify the flame, but doing so would require her to sacrifice her life. Kratos, seeing the innocence of his own deceased daughter Calliope in Pandora, spent much of the game desperately trying to find a way to save her while still achieving his vengeance. When Pandora finally sacrificed herself against Kratos' desperate pleas, the Spartan opens the box only to find it completely empty, leading to one of the greatest twists in the series. The truth was that Kratos had already absorbed the power of hope when he opens the box in the very first game. But that power was buried deep under years of guilt and rage. It was only through Pandora's memory and her message that Kratos was able to forgive himself and unleash that dormant power to defeat Zeus. In Valhalla, Pandora returns as a spiritual anchor for Kratos' redemption. In the DLC's final moments, Kratos sits on the throne of his past and recites her exact words. Hope is what makes us strong. It is why we are here. It is what we fight with when all else is lost. She represents the innocence he failed to save, but whose message he finally succeeded in honoring, proving that he has finally moved from a god of war to a god of hope. The Berserker King isn't just a hard boss battle, but he has some interesting story tied to him, which games don't throw at your face. You have to dig in to connect the dots. The story of the final Berserker, King Rolf Kraki, is a tale of a legendary king who became a tyrant, leading a ghost story that Kratos must finish. While many players treat the Berserker gravestones as just a checklist for 100% completion, the lore behind them reveals a dark history of obsession and a sword that became a prison. In the lore of God of War Ragnarok, King Rolf was once a powerful mortal ruler who sought to maintain his reign forever. To do this, he gathered 12 fanatically loyal warriors, the Berserkers. The key to his power was the hilt of Skofnung, a legendary artifact that contained the souls of these 12 warriors, making him nearly invincible as he could call upon their spirits in battle. As the king became more paranoid, he led his berserkers on a bloody campaign across the realms, slaughtering anyone who opposed him. Eventually, their reign of terror was ended, and they were buried in berserker gravestones scattered throughout the 9 realms to keep their dangerous spirits bound. Kratos encounters the first gravestone in Midgard and retrieves the broken hilt. To repair it and draw out the king, he must travel to all 12 gravestones and defeat the spirits of Rolf's personal guard. These aren't just fights, they're lessons. When you finally return to the king's grave in Midgard and place the hilt back into the stone, you summon King Rolf Kraki himself. He is considered the ultimate test of your combat skills, rivaled only by Njár. The genius of his design is that he has no unique moves of his own. Instead, he uses the abilities of every single berserker you fought previously. He switches between frost, fire, poison, and bifrost attacks instantly, forcing you to use every reflex you learned during the quest. Defeating him grants Kratos the hilt of Skofnung as a usable relic, and it is widely considered the best in the game. When activated, it doesn't just buff you, it summons the 12 spectral berserkers to swarm and shred enemies for a short duration. It's a poetic end. The very souls that once terrorized the realms are now bound to serve the god of war himself. There's a crucial detail about Mimir that explains one of the biggest plot holes people think exists in Ragnarok, but actually proves how smart the writing is. You might remember in the 2018 game that Kratos had to cut off Mimir's head, and later, with the help of Brock and Sindri, they had to replace his missing eye with a Bifrost crystal that Mimir had hidden for safekeeping. These aren't just fancy eyes that let you travel between realms. They're ancient gifts from the giants that grant the holder the ability to perceive the true nature of things. In God of War Ragnarok, Mimir casually mentions that his eye can see through the illusions of the Aesir. This single line of dialogue explains why the Allfather, the greatest sorcerer in the 9 realms, couldn't just use a simple magic spell to look like Tyr. If Odin had used a magical glamour or a shape-shifting spell, Mimir's Bifrost Eye would have spotted the deception the moment he walked into the room. Because of this, Odin was forced to do things the hard way. He had to physically look like the real Tyr and physically disguise himself, effectively method acting the role without using magical concealment and using magic to hide, all because he knew Mimir could see right through him. This limitation actually serves as the most brilliant piece of foreshadowing in the entire game. Throughout the story, Mimir, the self-proclaimed smartest man alive, is strangely unable to get a read on Tyr. He even occasionally mentions that Tyr is not acting like himself, or that his pacifism feels off, but he dismisses it as trauma from Odin's torture. He thought that being in a prison for a long time made him like this. The subtle horror is that Odin's disguise was so perfect, it didn't just fool Kratos and Atreus, it specifically bypassed Mimir's magical eyes. The fact that Mimir couldn't see any magic on Tyr wasn't proof that Tyr was real. It was the ultimate hint that there was something fishy going on about the Norse god of war, because the only thing Mimir can't see through is a lie told without magic. Some of the dialogues that Christopher Judge uses are not only due to Kratos' stoic nature, but also because the actor behind the scenes is a certified sci-fi legend and played characters apart from Kratos as well. If you noticed that Kratos says the word indeed a lot in God of War Ragnarok, this isn't just a random script choice. It's actually a massive tribute to Judge's most famous role before he became the Ghost of Sparta. For 10 seasons on Stargate SG-1, Judge played Teal'c, a stoic alien warrior who became iconic for his deep, deadpan delivery of the word indeed in response to pretty much everything. The writers at Santa Monica Studio knew exactly what they were doing, and included the line as a deliberate nod to his legacy. Throughout the game, especially during the boat rides, Mimir often tries to prompt Kratos into saying it, and when the big guy finally drops a flat rhythmic indeed, it is delivered with the exact same stoic nature that Judge used for Teal'c. The Valhalla DLC leans even harder into this, with Mimir joking about Kratos' limited vocabulary, only for Kratos to hit him with the same catchphrase again. In my eyes, it fits perfectly because Judge's portrayal of Kratos is defined by restraint and his stoic kind of nature. This shows an evolution from the screaming rage of the Greek era into a stoic father figure nature that Kratos now has. Funnily enough, Judge famously nearly turned down the role because he didn't want to do a video game voice, but seeing the emotional depth of the script convinced him to sign on, bringing his legendary vocabulary with him. Ironically enough, with a new God of War series for Amazon on the horizon, the studio has been searching to find a live-action Kratos, and it was proving to be a nearly impossible choice. Fans have thrown around names like Triple H for years due to the physical resemblance, but for obvious reasons, namely his age and retirement from active performance, that isn't happening for now. But the most interesting twist in this casting saga is that they reportedly offer the role to the man who defined it. Christopher Judge himself has hinted that he was approached or at least considered for the live-action adaptation, but he likely turned it down, or wasn't pursued for the final cut. While his voice is Kratos's, the physical demands of playing a shirtless Spartan warrior in a live-action series are very different from motion capture. Christopher Judge has also expressed that he respects the character too much to let it become a parody of itself if the physical stunt work didn't match the voice. And let's be honest, we all know that while his voice is perfect for Kratos, he doesn't look exactly like him. Then came the final twist that almost no one saw coming. There were rumors that they were going to choose Ryan Hurst for the role, the actor who played Thor in Ragnarok. It would be the ultimate role reversal. Hurst is a massive guy standing 6'4" and proved he has the acting persona to carry deep, tragic storylines as Opie in Sons of Anarchy and Beta in The Walking Dead. Fans argued that since he already understands the Santa Monica universe in and out from playing the God of Thunder, he could bring a unique, respectful depth to the Ghost of Sparta, trading Mjolnir for the Leviathan axe in a twist that no one saw coming. The Chains of Olympus also make a grand return. They're like the spine of the Greek world that Kratos once snapped in half. That particular scene is one of the most iconic scenes from the Greek era. In the original saga, this wasn't just a background texture. It was a colossal structure that physically anchored Mount Olympus to the underworld, thus acting as a security system for Pandora's box and held tight by the massive stone grip of the three judges of the dead, who were Minos, Aegis, and Rhadamanthus. In God of War 3, Kratos realized that to reach the flame of Olympus, he had to break the judge's grip, so he brutally shattered their statues and destroyed the anchors, causing a disastrous event that didn't just separate the realms, but literally broke the machinery of the afterlife, leaving souls to wander in chaos without judgment. In the Valhalla DLC, these chains now return as a haunting environmental symbol during the Greek trials, with massive, broken links floating in the void of the upper shore to remind Kratos of his destructive legacy. Just as he once climbs the physical chain to destroy his father, he now climbs the memory of the chain to find forgiveness, a journey made even harder by the head of Helios, who constantly mocks him for the structural and spiritual collapse he left in his wake. During your many reruns in Valhalla, Kratos will talk to Mimir about his first family, finally peeling back the layers of the tragedy that turned him into the ghost of Sparta. He recounts the night Ares tricked him into slaughtering his wife, Lysandra, and his daughter Calliope in a village temple, believing that severing his mortal ties would make him the ultimate warrior. But the true heartbreak lies in the story of Chains of Olympus, which he shares with a heavy heart. Kratos reveals that he actually reunited with Calliope in the fields of Elysium and gave up his godhood just to be with her. However, Persephone forced him into an impossible choice: stay with his daughter while the world and Elysium itself were destroyed, or abandon her forever to save existence. Kratos admits to Mimir that a part of him would have preferred to stay and let the world burn just to spend his final hours holding his child. As for Lysandra, the conversation is even more painful. He confesses that he was a terrible husband who constantly forsook her needs in his blind pursuit of glory as a Spartan general. He solemnly states that he would have been a better man had he listened to her warnings back then, acknowledging that his deafness to her wisdom was the first step on his road to damnation. In the Valhalla DLC, while you expect to take on story bosses like Tyr or the spectral echoes of monsters, there is a way to fight a familiar nightmare if you know exactly where to look. To unlock this hidden challenge, you first need to complete the main story questline ending with The Work Part 3, Benevolence, but the real grind happens in the Greek labyrinth of Upper Valhalla. You must first unlock 2 other legendary arenas that serve as nostalgic torture chambers: the Aegean Sea Boat, which is hidden near the East Wing, and the Desert of Lost Souls near the West Wing. Once those are open, the game hides the final test behind a kill count. You must defeat at least 7 of Valhalla's Chosen in a single run. Only then will the notification pop, allowing you to climb to the second floor overlooking the ascending sands. There, you'll find a ledge leading to the Forum, the massive open arena where Kratos once battled Hercules in God of War 3. However, instead of fighting your brother, interacting with the Red Rift here spawns one of the 9 Berserker souls from the main game. It effectively turns this arena into an infinite randomized boss rush against the hardest enemies in the Norse realms. Finishing the story of Valhalla requires beating in 4 different runs, and after each victory, the narrative forces Kratos to reflect on a specific trauma from the original games, from the blood pact with Ares to the violent beheading of Helios that plunged Greece into darkness, and even the opening of Pandora's box. In each case, however, Kratos had to fight Tyr again and again. After finally defeating Tyr for a 4th time and processing his decision to release hope at the end of God of War 3, the story culminates with Kratos confronting a vision of his younger self sitting on his old throne. In the final cutscene, Kratos delivers a powerful monologue, coming face to face with his old monster, but also acknowledging that he has always had the capacity to be better. When the vision appears, Kratos sits upon the throne, finally reconciling the ghost of Sparta with the god he is now, and returns to the outside world to inform Freya that he is prepared to serve on her council. But even after the credits roll, the story isn't quite over. There's a secret ending that serves as a beautiful epilogue for Mimir and Sigrun. After completing several more runs, you unlock additional dialogue where Mimir recounts his relationship with the former Valkyrie Queen. Sigrun, having violated the rules of Valhalla to save Kratos and Mimir from an earlier attempt gone wrong, finds her connection to the realm weakened and begins to question her purpose. Over the course of these extra runs, she realizes that instead of reaffirming her bond with Valhalla, she wants to leave her post and travel the world to find herself. Mimir, in a moment of profound growth, realizes that although he loves her, he can't hold her back. The post-game story ends with Sigrun's departure and a promise to return to Mimir in time, proving that Valhalla isn't just about Kratos making peace with his past, but also about his friends finding the courage to face their future. Lastly, I need to discuss and compare how the Ragnarok event ends in the game and how it ends in the myths, because the difference between the two is a lot. In the game, Ragnarok is a war of liberation, more of a precision attack against Asgard, where Kratos actively defies the script of fate to save the innocent people of the Nine Realms. In the actual Norse mythology, however, it's a war to end all wars, an apocalypse where almost everyone dies and there's nothing anyone can do about it. In God of War Ragnarok, the event is portrayed more like a rebellion. To breach Asgard's walls, Kratos enlists Sutra, who tragically sacrifices his consciousness to transform into a mindless colossal monster of fire called Ragnarok that distracts the Aesir. The battle features the legendary duel between Thor and Jormungandr, but with a sci-fi twist. Thor hits the serpent so hard that it's sent back in time, fulfilling the loop we saw in the 2018 game. The biggest deviation is the fate of the Allfather. Instead of a glorious battle, Thor is killed by Odin for refusing to fight, and Odin himself is defeated by a team effort before having his soul trapped in a Jotun marble, which Sindri, in a moment of pure grieving rage, simply smashes with a hammer. Asgard is obliterated by Sutra, but the other realms survive. The survivors, led by Sif and Hildisvini, relocate to Vanaheim to rebuild, while Atreus leaves to find the remaining giants, and Kratos discovers a hidden shrine not depicting him as a destroyer, but as a revered god of peace. Unlike the game, where only the Asgard realm falls, the mythic Sutra, in contrast to the game's version of Sutra, engulfs the entire earth in fire, causing the land to sink into the sea. Eventually, the earth resurfaces, fertile and green, with only 2 human survivors left, Leif and Leifresir, emerging from the World Tree to repopulate the world, while a few younger gods like Balder and Magni return to rule. The game chose hope over history, allowing Kratos to break the cycle one last time. And that's it, guys. Let us know if you had fun, and if you're really into God of War, make sure to check part 1 of this series, which is on your screen right now. I'm Adam with Syrric, and once again, thanks for watching.